Haldane did some simple calculations and found that humans couldn't have possibly evolved from ape-like creatures. There just wasn't enough time. His calculations directly conflicted with the theory of evolution. This became known as Haldane's dilemma, and this dilemma was never resolved, and it's been going on since 1957. So you'd think we'll know about this by now.
Welcome to the Creation Today show, where we bring together interviews with experts and solid Bible teaching. Your host, Eric Hovind, affirms the ultimate authority of God's Word, the truth of creation, and why it matters to you.
So how do you destroy evolution in 5 minutes or less? Guys, you are in for a great conversation today on the Creation Today show. I'm your host, Eric Hovind, and joining me is the director of Living Waters Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Mr. John Harris. John, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, man, it's fantastic to be here, Eric. I'm doing very well. It's great to see you.
I am so thankful to finally be having a great conversation with you like this one. I first heard about this argument that you're going to present that is, that explosion maybe you should have done an atomic bomb more than just a little bit. This argument that you're going to present is absolutely destructive to it's a nuclear bomb to the evolutionary idea, isn't it?
That's absolutely true, Eric. There's absolutely no recovering from this. If you take this to someone who tells you evolution is a fact, they're going to be shocked because there is nothing they can do. Most of the time when I've spoken to people about this, they go completely silent for a long time because they realize they have no argument against it. So it's going to be fantastic. I really can't wait.
Well, the Bible tells us to cast down arguments that exalt themselves against the knowledge of God. And guys, that's exactly what John is going to do today. He's presenting an argument, and if I understand this correctly, you do kind of want to set up the argument for people before you give them the little 5-minute version, right?
That's right. If I just prepare it a little bit so that people understand where the argument is coming from, the whole thing would make much more sense, and you'd be more confident in sharing the actual the truth with people.
And really, that's the point. We don't want you guys to just simply hear the argument. We want you to know the science behind it and the argument so that you can present this. So to my skeptic friends that are watching, I am, first of all, thank you. I'm so glad you're actually checking out the other side and finding out exactly what we're saying or what some of the arguments are. There's a lot of people that close their eyes to these arguments or they dismiss them. I just want you to know we're going to do the best we can to cover as much as we can. And then in the second half of this show with our partners, John, you're going to go through every single thing you've ever heard as an objection to this argument, and you go through all of the so-called objections and show how they don't work. Is that correct?
I'm going to go through everything plus more, and if there are some questions coming up, I'm happy to answer those too. But I don't think you'll find that I've missed anything. You'll find that all the questions have been answered and dealt with.
You're the director of Living Waters Europe, which means like Great Comfort here in America, you're over there in Europe doing lots and lots of evangelism, and you've used this argument before. How has it worked?
Oh, every single time it's been deadly. In fact, I'm going to show you a video at the end, which unfortunately won't make it in the first half. It'll happen afterwards, where I've actually done it and I've left people speechless. I've had people who said things like, you know what, this is so incredible. I'm going to go to church because of this.
Beautiful. Okay. Yeah. Introduce this subject. I don't want to waste time. I want to get right into this. Introduce this subject. What do we need to know before we hear the argument? And then let's hear that argument.
All right. No problem. Can I share my screen?
Please do. Actually, yeah, the slides are really going to help on this because of the way the argument goes and the science behind it is just fascinating. So, and by the way, as you guys listen to this and my partners out here, thank you guys for joining me. I love having you guys on here. Thomas and Rachel and everybody on here. Thank you guys. And Amanda. I love science, and the more science I study, the more it shows me the mind of God and how genius it is. So as we watch the lead up to the argument, first of all, take notes, be ready to take notes. I'm ready to take notes. Okay. And then let your mind just be in awe of who God is as we learn. John, take it away, man.
Absolutely. This is fantastic. I'm so excited to be introducing this. This is about time we as Christians actually know this thing so that we can use it everywhere we go. So today's topic is about Haldane's dilemma. So what is Haldane's dilemma? Well, Haldane's dilemma literally destroys evolution in 5 minutes. I'm not exaggerating, and it is irrefutable. Now, this dilemma is really easy to present to people. You can just explain it verbally, or you can write it down on a piece of paper, show it to them. I now put it on a PowerPoint slide, which I can show you later, and it's super easy to use. You don't have to remember anything at all, and I'm happy to share it with you. So if Eric, you want me to pass it on for you to share it with other people, you can put it on a tablet.
I want the PowerPoint.
Done.
Yes.
And you can share it with people, and you can also use it yourself on a tablet, on a PC, on iPad, whatever you've got PowerPoint with. It'll be fantastic. This argument, this dilemma is so effective. I've used this during open air. You're going to see that later on when I show you a demonstration of it. I've used it in universities. I've used it when talking to a hardened evolutionist. I've used it everywhere, especially with Christians who believe that God somehow used evolution to bring about life. So Haldane's dilemma is very effective, and it's very easy, and it's very quick to go through. So what is it? How does it work, and how can we use it? I'm going to go fairly fast with this because I'm condensing a 1-hour topic into 30 minutes, actually 20 minutes, 22, 23 minutes. So here it comes. So here's a quick introduction. This dilemma was brought up by a very famous British scientist. His name was John Burdon Sanderson Haldane, but they nicknamed him Jack. I have no idea why, or JBS. He was an evolutionist himself. This is what happened after they discovered that the DNA molecule exists in the form of a 3-dimensional double helix in 1953. Haldane did some simple calculations a few years later and found that humans couldn't have possibly evolved from ape-like creatures. There just wasn't enough time. So how did he do it? Well, he took everything into account. I don't have time to go through this, but if you want me to later, I can. And he found out in his calculations that his calculations directly conflicted with the theory of evolution. This became known as Haldane's dilemma, and this dilemma was never resolved, and it's been going on since 1957. So you'd think we'll know about this by now. But of course, some evolutionists go around saying that this dilemma was resolved, even though it wasn't. But those who say it don't really understand the dilemma, nor do they understand the solution. This is what they do. The moment you talk to somebody, they go where? They go on Wikipedia, and they just repeat what it says. And it turns out the solution they say they have, which is on their Wikipedia, is worse than the dilemma itself.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. If what they're telling me is true and they take it at face value, then they destroyed evolution again. So it just backfires on them all the way. We're going to talk about this later on as I take you through the refutation. But first, to appreciate the seriousness of this dilemma, we'll have to go all the way back to the time of Darwin. In Darwin's days, when he wrote about the origin of species, he didn't know the complexity of a cell. I don't need to tell you that, Eric. He thought a cell is made of a microscopic lump of jelly-like substance, entirely destitute of texture, destitute of organs, formless lump of albuminous matter, and with no trace of organization. Basically, he thought the cell is textureless, organless, formless, jelly-like material that has no organization. Here we are, fast forwarding 150 years later, and this is what we discover. Here is a simple diagram of a cell. And it turns out this is what this formless, textureless lump of jelly-like substance really looks like. I've got this big printout that I take with me when I'm doing this in person to show people, and it baffles them. It's mind-blowing. This is more complicated than a television circuit diagram, if you've ever seen one. We don't even know everything about the cell yet. So much for Darwin's jelly-like substance with no trace of organization. I think it's clear we should not be getting science lessons from Charles Darwin. It turns interrupt me anytime you want, Eric.
This is good. This is good.
Yeah? So it turns out in the nucleus of every cell, there is this most fascinating, sophisticated database system that we have ever seen anywhere. We call it DNA. DNA is organized in long structures like chromosomes. Humans have 46 of them. That's 23 pairs from each parent in each cell. Here you see it under a light microscope. This is under an electron microscope. Here is one zoomed in. I mean, this is impressive. But we haven't even touched the surface. So I'm going to do this really quick because normally I take a little bit more time explaining this. But let me show you how DNA works. This is what a double standard DNA looks like. It has two sides and it's twisted. That's why we call it double helix. If you untwist it, it looks like a ladder. The rungs of this ladder are called base pairs. We call it base pairs because there are two of them, one on each side of the strand. These base pairs, one on each side, are holding the sides of the ladder. And these base pairs are the bits that hold information about everything. It's actually the database in the DNA. So that's why we have things like 10 fingers or 8 fingers and 2 thumbs, because the DNA says so. So we have 2 arms and 2 legs because the DNA says so. We have eyes, ears, nose, tongue, liver, kidneys, a digestive system, skeletal system, circulatory system. All of those things is because of what's programmed in the DNA system. This is one giant database full of information. The entire physical body is built the way it is because of the DNA database. It's like an instruction manual that tells you how to build you. Now, there are a lot of similarities between a computer architecture and DNA. And I'm not sure if anyone have done this comparison before, but as a computer systems analyst and a software designer and developer by profession, I can tell you that the similarities are uncanny. I'm going to take you through this very quickly just to blow your mind. For example, a computer has bits and bytes. I'm sure we've all heard of these terminologies before. A byte is 8 bits. Well, in the DNA, instead of bits, you have base pairs. And instead of bytes, you have something called codons. And a codon is made of 3 base pairs. Look, if you can't follow this, don't worry. I'm just doing this to show you how fascinating this is. And also, it's going to help you later on when we talk about mutations. In computers, several bytes make up a word depending on the computer architecture. In the DNA, several codons make a gene and several genes make a genome. In computers, all the bits and bytes together makes up the total RAM. And in the DNA, all the base pairs make up the DNA. In computers, the instructions are combined within bytes, while in DNA, the instructions are contained within the codons, which are used to make proteins. They are just identical, except the DNA and cell are infinitely more sophisticated than a computer system. If I were to explain how the DNA makes copies of itself and creates protein, which we don't have time to do, and usually I include that, you would have no doubt that an almighty intelligent designer has put this all together. I'm sure, Eric, you have explained this many times in the past, and you have probably a lot of material you can show people, but this is just mind-blowing.
This isn't even the argument that you're going to cover. This is something else that's mind-blowing, and it's not even this other mind-blowing argument.
And 100%. Now, Bill Gates said in his book, DNA is like a computer, but far, far more advanced than any software ever created. Now, no one would believe that a computer is made by accident, right? But we go around telling our students what? That DNA came about by random chance processes. It's just embarrassing. It really is. If each one of these DNA strands inside each one of these cells, of our cells, were to be unwound and they would be literally 5 or 6 feet long each. We have about 50 to 75 trillion of these cells in our bodies. Sadly, some of us have more of those cells than others. I'm sure of mine. If the DNA from each cell were placed end to end, the chain would be from 90 to 135 trillion meters long. I don't know if you have any idea how long that is, but I'm going to give you an idea. If all the DNA in one person's body were placed end to end, it would extend to the moon, not just halfway there, but all the way there, but not just once, but 552,000 times. How much information is that? I'm going to paraphrase that to, it's a lot of information. Now, if you didn't think that's impressive, check this one. If one set of DNA, that's one cell's worth from every person who ever lived, estimated to be almost 50 billion, whoever worked that one out, were placed in a pile, it would weigh less than 1 aspirin. Remember, DNA is basically the instruction to create a complete human being in microscopic detail. So if I were to store away the entire database of every human being ever lived, it would fit in a container that weighs about 320 milligrams. Now, I mean, this is just, can you imagine, right? Remember, that's not just one human being. That's every human being who ever lived. You could just rebuild all of mankind from scratch. All right.
And this isn't even the argument. Oh, my goodness. Wow. Okay, this is good.
Unbelievable. So this is where Haldane's dilemma comes in. So let's start. Who was Haldane and what did he say? Well, Haldane was a famous scientist. He was a British-born Indian scientist known for his work in the study of physiology, genetics, evolutionary biology, and mathematics, where he made innovation contributions to the field of statistics and biostatistics. Let me summarize this for you in case you didn't get it. Haldane was a clever guy. I think that's he's certainly cleverer than me. All right. And I'm happy to admit that. Okay. So, and even though he was the one who discovered this dilemma, which completely destroys evolution, as far as I know, he still died as an evolutionist.
Wow.
Unbelievable. In fact, he was a socialist, Marxist, atheist, and humanist. So I can honestly tell you he wasn't a Christian.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's probably why he held on to evolution. If you want, and that's what happens all the time, we've discovered this, if you want to believe a particular worldview, you will find a reason to believe that. So you will hold on to evolution in order to be this person instead of searching for the truth. But that's a whole nother subject. By the way, I think if you grow a mustache, I'm looking side by side. I think we might have a match here, buddy.
I think I could look like him.
I think you possibly could, man. I think you could make that happen.
I'm not sure I'm that handsome, I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to be able to pull it off. But thank you for the compliment. I'll take it. But this guy goes as far as possible you can imagine from Christianity. He's literally the opposite of everything a Christian stands for, right?
Yeah.
But John Haldane was so clever, other evolutionists said that he was perhaps the most brilliant science popularizer of his generation. Some even said he's the cleverest man I ever knew. So there you have it. If nothing else, this guy was smart. They're all happy to declare this, right? So evolutionists can't say this guy wasn't clever enough. Now, according to Theodosius, there you go, I could do this, Dobzhansky, he was very well known himself as a Ukrainian-American geneticist and evolutionary biologist. He said Haldane was always recognized as a singular case. Now, singular means he was exceptionally good. He was just great. And Michael J.D. White, who was a zoologist and cytologist, by the way, cytologist is not Scientologist. Cytology is the branch of biology. He said that Haldane was the most erudite biologist. Now, erudite means that he was like great, with great knowledge. He was the most erudite biologist of his generation and perhaps of this century. I think we're making the point here. It's very clear. Haldane was clever. He was smart. He was intelligent. And it makes sense for evolutionists to really pay attention to what this guy is saying. Agreed? I think so. So what was this dilemma that he was talking about? Well, to make this easy for me and for you, I'm going to read some bits from this book called The Biotic Message, which explains it all. If you want to know more information, you can get this book and read it for yourself, but it's a bit technical, but I don't want you to worry. I'm going to explain everything along the way. Afterwards, I'm going to graphically show you how it fits all together. So in the 1950s, the evolutionary geneticist J.B.S. Haldane calculated the maximum rate of genetic change due to differential survival. He reluctantly, by the way, concluded there is a serious problem here, now known as Haldane's dilemma. His calculations show that many species of higher vertebrate could not plausibly evolve in the available time. Evolution requires the substitution of old prevalent traits with new rare traits. There are limits to the rate these substitutions can occur, limits that depend primarily on the reproduction capacity of the species. Haldane's dilemma examines these limits. So what is he saying? He's saying that Haldane understood how mutations work in the DNA. A substitution is a type of mutation that's relatively common. This happens when one of these base pairs we just talked about breaks off or becomes corrupt, changes. It can go corrupt because when it makes a copy of itself, when a cell makes a copy of itself, or when it's making a copy for translation, or when it's exposed to external ray like X-ray. So Haldane, who was a population geneticist, wanted to work out the limits to this mutation and see how many generations it would take for a human being to evolve. So how does it all work? Here's an example from this book, same book. Imagine a breeding population of 100,000 individuals. Imagine 99,998 have the old trait O, and 2, a male and a female, have the new trait N. So old trait O, new trait N. Imagine trait N has just arisen from O by beneficial mutation. The evolutionary goal is to substitute trait N for trait O in the population. To accomplish this goal, differential survival must eliminate the 99,998 type O individuals and all their heirs. So what is it saying? It's saying that if you have a mutation in a population and it just happens to be a good one, just by coincidence, then the couple who had the good mutation must outlive all the other people in that population. No big deal. It makes sense if you want to keep the good mutations in the population. So how is it going to do that? Well, this can be accomplished in a single generation if there is perfect selection. That is, if the survival values of O and N, that's the old and the new trait, are 0 and 1. 0 means it's not going to continue, and 1 means it's perfect selection. It's going to keep going and be part of the population. Yet there is an enormous cost involved. For every surviving type N, that's the new trait, individual, there are 49,999 individuals type O. That must perish without heirs. The population size must be regenerated from the two survivors. It makes sense. Basically, when there is a new beneficial trait, the individual or the couple with this new beneficial trait must survive over all the others who don't have the beneficial mutation, clearly. Now, everything should hopefully be clear so far. But if not, don't worry. I'm going to explain all this in a simpler way in just a minute. This is where it gets interesting. So make sure you're paying attention to this bit because it's where it's all happening. It goes on to say, let us assume evolution can happen like this continuously, generation after generation, for millions of years. Wow, that's a big assumption anyway. But let's take it. Take a species like man with a nominal 20 years generation time. Extrapolate backward from this known species to a time 10 million years ago. This is 3 times earlier than the said occurrence of the 4-foot-high Australopithecine Lucy. So he's saying, let's pretend the human generation is 20 years and an evolution happened over 10 million years ago, which, by the way, is 3 times older than Lucy, who is supposedly one of our early human ancestors. Now, by the way, the author of this book, you'll be pleased to know, is Walter Riemann, and he's a young Earth creationist. And he's being extra generous here because he's giving the evolutionists plenty more time than they have. That's how confident that he is about this dilemma. He's so confident that he's happy to give them 3 times more years than they have because he knows it's not going to help them. And that's what I do everywhere I go when I'm presenting this to the evolutionists. I literally change all the figures in their favor because I know there's going to be no hope. So Walter Riemann goes on to say, this is twice as old as the alleged split between gorilla, chimpanzee, and man. So he's saying not only is the 10 million years is 3 times older than Lucy, but it also happens to be twice as old as the supposed split between humans and gorillas and chimpanzees. Now, I don't know about you, but this is pretty generous. And I think you can't get fairer than that.
He's actually setting them up to say, hey, even if I give you extra time, he's kind of setting him up to say, even with extra time, he's going to show the dilemma here.
Absolutely. He's basically going to He's going to be so generous ridiculously all the way through to point out that, look, I'm going to give you all the benefit of doubt. And despite that, it's just not going to work out. I'm going to show you how it's not going to work out. And I do this when I'm doing this in person. I say, hey, whatever you give me, I'm just going to double it or something like that. Right. So he goes on to say, right, in that much time, how many traits could be substituted at this crashing pace? So he's given him a crashing pace. This is beyond what they say it is, right? 1 per generation, maximum approximately 500,000. So he's saying, look, if we're kind enough to give you, the evolutionist, more time than you ask for, in fact, 2 or 3 times more, and pretend we get 1 beneficial mutation for every single human generation, which we don't get, we will even ignore the problem we call fitness cost. Now, when I'm doing this talk in a more broader way, I explain fitness cost and how there is no such thing as a beneficial mutation without fitness cost. You pay for it. You never improve. You improve one place, there is a detriment somewhere else. So there's no such thing as a free lunch. If that's the case, then we end up with just 500,000 beneficial DNA base pairs. Now, is that a problem? Well, yes, it's a big problem. Why? Because that's 1/100th of 1% of the nucleotide sites in each human. Nucleotide is another word for base pair. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means it's a disaster. But why is it a disaster? Because that's about 0.0001 of the entire DNA, when the actual number we need is more than 30 million beneficial mutations, not even 500,000. You'll see in a minute what I mean and why I'm saying 30 million. I'm coming to that in a minute. We just don't get enough mutations. So the figures are not working out, even after being generous. Yes, go for it.
So in 10 million years, at 20 years per generation, and one beneficial mutation per generation, you would accomplish 500,000 beneficial mutations. And that's nothing compared to what we actually need. You need 30 million of them.
Yeah, and we're being extra generous here. So we're giving them plenty more mutations than they are expecting, because Haldane's dilemma, you'll see in a minute, is far more explosive than this. You will see actually how many mutations they think they're going to get. And then I want to see their faces. What happens is you show them what's impossible and you make it 10,000 times worse. And then, then you see the results, right?
Okay.
So after being extremely generous with the mutation rates, and even after giving the evolutionists 2 or 3 times more time, even after ignoring the fitness cost, even after giving them a generous 20 years per generation so that they have more offsprings, mathematically, evolution just goes bankrupt. There is no way to fix this. In fact, later, when they try to fix it, they only manage to fix it by, guess what? Abandoning natural selection. And this is the bit that makes me so happy. Right? They abandon natural selection. What have they told you? It's mutation through natural selection. Well, they abandon it and they don't tell you, which ends up confirming what Haldane said all along. They invent a new evolution theory that I'm going to introduce to you in the second half, right? Well, you're not going to believe what I'm going to tell you, that we all overlooked, which makes everything much worse, right? So basically, they told us evolution has changed and no Christian picked up on it. And we're going to check it out later. But it gets worse, my dear friend Eric. If we actually worked with the real numbers Haldane gave us, then it falls apart even more, because Haldane said we only get one beneficial mutation, not every generation, but every 300 generations. So what happens if we use the mutations or the mutation rate that Haldane came up with? Well, my good friend Eric, we only end up with 1,667 base pairs. I'm speechless.
So instead of 500,000 beneficial mutations at 1 per generation, you actually only have 1,667, and you need to get 30 million. And that was giving you 10 million years to do this.
Thank you, Eric, for noticing, because I wanted to point that out. Okay.
Wow.
So how are we not using this? I mean, this is what we call a catastrophe for evolutionists. That's why this became known as Haldane's dilemma. And by the way, an evolutionist came up with that. Again, I'm going to be explaining that in the second half when we get there. There is no recovery, Eric. There is no way out. This is dead end for them, right? So this whole idea of evolution that teaches from goo to you by way of the zoo became scientifically and mathematically bankrupt overnight. Last time I checked, mathematics is a valid form of science, right? And if mathematics goes against evolution, then evolution is not scientific. I think we can all agree with that.
Yes. Okay.
So there is no kind way of saying this to the evolutionists, but it's game over. It's farewell. It's adios, ciao, choose. Whatever language you want to say this in, it's gone. Evolutionists have been keeping this very quiet. Why do you think they've been keeping it very quiet for decades? It's for a good reason. But it's time it came out, and it's time it's exposed, and it's time it's been used. We Christians, we are allowing too much. Okay, now there were 4 things I want you to remember before I show you how to present this. Now, because I don't have much time, and I'm going to save some time, and I never keep an eye on time, so Eric, you might have to sort me out with this, but I'm already predicting the future. We don't have time to go through all the 4, so I'm going to give you a summary. So this is what you're missing. I can't believe you're missing all of this. All right. So here are all the facts again, known as the summary of summaries. Fact number 1, the human DNA is larger than 4.5 billion base pairs. You probably didn't realize this because most people tell you it's 3.2, but it got changed. They updated those databases. It's now 4.5 billion base pairs. But we'll assume it's only 3 billion base pairs because we're kind and we love the evolutionists and we want to make it easy for them. Fact number 2, according to evolutionists, human ancestors lived about 6 million years ago. Some say 5, some say 6, some say less. Well, we're going to be extra generous here and give them 10, as we said we will do. And fact number 3, according to evolutionists, humans and ape-like creatures differ by 15%. You probably heard people talk about 3 and 4%. Well, guess what? The latest figures, as far as 2021 is concerned, it's gone up to by 15%. You know why? Because they've got the latest genome being mapped. So now we've got the figures. But guess what we're going to do? We're going to go all out and say 1%. I mean, how many times worse would it be if we use those figures, right? And fact number 4, even though the average human generation is 25 years, we'll assume that it's 20 to help them out. Again, we're being kind Christians, and we must always make sure we come across very gracious. And finally, going all the way back to where we started, despite overwhelming evidence that we don't get any beneficial mutations without fitness cost, this is important. Maybe we need to talk about this later on. And despite Haldane calculating that you get only one beneficial mutation every 300 generations, guess what we're going to do? We're going to go all out on this one. We're going to give these evolutionists one fully bona fide beneficial mutation, which is going to be...
You are too kind. Too kind, John. Too kind.
You know what? If I wasn't so humble, I would receive that.
I can feel the love, buddy. I can feel the love for the evolutionists coming right here.
Look, am I coming across excited? Because I am.
Yes. Yes.
We have good reasons, right? Because we've been told all along a lie, and now we've found out. It's almost like that lie has been exposed, and everybody's going to find out. And they've been hiding it under the carpet for so long.
Wow.
So seriously, we can't get fairer than that. This is giving the evolutionists the maximum benefit. We're going way beyond the call of duty here. There's no reason to get a single complaint about our calculations, Eric. So hopefully you won't get any emails complaining, saying you've not been fair. So theoretically, evolutionists should be happy with us. They shouldn't be angry or unhappy. All right. Now comes the bit that I'm going to tell you how you use this in real life. I don't even know if I'm doing well for time, but I'll do this quick. Now, this is the slide that I was telling you about, and it's already built in to do all the tricks for you. You don't have to remember numbers. You don't have to remember anything. As you can see, it says number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Take it in that order. If you're on a PowerPoint, you just say next, 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 or you just touch the box on that numeric order. So literally, number 1 pops up like that. And you tell the guy, look, how many human base pairs do we have in DNA? And they would say, well, 4, 5, whatever they come up with, doesn't matter. Say, look, I'm going to give you all 3 billion base pairs. This works in your favor, trust me. And then I'd say, hey, tell me, what's the percentage difference between an ape-like creature and a human? And they would say, oh, we think this is 3 or 4%. Actually, if they're educated, they know it's 15 now. But we're going to go all out and shock them with 1%. We're going to assume that it's a 1% difference. We'll say, look, number 3, how many changes do we need? If it's just 1% difference of 3 billion, well, what's 1% of 3 billion? Well, they should be able to work this out generally quickly. It's 30 million. That's it. And say, okay, good. Let's go to number 4. Number 4, total years from an ape-like creature to humans. How many years ago did this happen? And they would say, well, this happened 4, 5, 6 million years ago. I say, look, I tell you what, don't worry about it. I'm going to give you all of 10 years because I'm loving and I'm kind and I want you to win. That's what I want you to do. And then I'll say, look, how many years per generation does a human being have? And they're going to say, well, I don't know, maybe 25 years or 30 years. I say, look, don't worry. We're going to give you all of 20 years. Is that fair? Yes, that's fair. How about this last one? Total generations per beneficial mutation. How many generations do you need before you have one beneficial mutation in the population? And he's going to say, well, I don't know, maybe several generations. You say, well, I tell you what. I'm going to give you one whole beneficial mutation every generation. This cannot be unfair, right? This is a totally fair mathematical equation. And then you say, look, let's work it out. How many beneficial mutations we'll have if all these things are true? And you just divide them by each other and you end up with 500,000. And I say, does that make sense to you? He would say, yes. I say, well, just look at the number. I need 30 million. You've got 500,000. How are you going to fix it, sir? I gave you all the benefit of doubt. How are you going to fix it? And then when I see him sweat and he doesn't know what to say because he's just been caught, you say, look, do you really want to see the real figures? The real figures is that you get one beneficial mutation every 300 generations. And if you were to divide those numbers, you get 1,667. Now tell me, what do you think? And at this point, they would explode because this is a religion. Right? Yes. Suddenly, you just told their religion that it's nonsense. and they have no idea what to do with it. These are facts. There is nothing you can do to walk away from it. Now, I'm going to just tell you one more thing, and then we can close, and then you can do what you like. If you really want to know how many years it really takes for us to have, if we have one beneficial mutation every 300 generation, well, you don't need 10 to get 30 million mutations. How many years will it take to do this? Well, it's 180 billion years. That's more than 10 times the age of the entire universe based on the evolutionary timescale.
Whoa! Now, so you need 180 billion years to go from an ape to a human. And that's still just with that 1% different, and we're 15% different. All you're doing is holding up a mirror saying, this is what you believe. This is what you claim. Just so you know, this is what you're trying to present as a scientific fact. And simple mathematics destroy the entire, that is how to destroy evolution in 5 minutes. Actually, I think you probably did that very part in less than 5 minutes.
I did it in 4 minutes. Practicing it. I did it in 4 minutes.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, I know you kind of worked your way up to presenting what it was so that we could have the science behind all these different numbers, but just presenting it is actually pretty simple. It doesn't make sense. But you say the atheists and the evolutionists, the skeptics, they're still not buying it, even after seeing the mathematics. Sometimes they come up with things to try to rescue this, their evolutionary religion.
Well, the professional priests, evolutionists, have say a lot, which I'm going to deal with later on. But the average guy literally had nothing to say. Literally, They just look at you blank and they say, "I don't know how that just happened. I don't know what to do with it." And by the way, if you want to stick to the 10 million years, and it still mutate in such a way that you have an ape-like creature coming to a human being, you need 60 beneficial mutations per generation. It's basically a miracle. You will need a miracle. If you see one of those happening where you get 60 mutations per generation, basically you've just seen a divine intervention, because that we don't even get one, but you'd need 60. That's 60 times more than what the level of generosity we've been so far. It's over, Eric. It really is.
It really is impossible. Okay, I want to get into what people say are objections to this, because it really is plain, simple mathematics, which is what makes this such a powerful dilemma. But there are objections. I want to get into that in the second half with my Creation Today partners. For those of you joining me on all the different social media platforms, thank you very much for hanging out with us. I would love for you to get in touch with John and get more of what Living Waters Europe is doing. You can subscribe to him on whatever social media platform you use, whether it's you guys are on Twitter and TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. Just type Living Waters Europe, Living Waters Europe, and you'll come to their information or come to their page. If you want to go to the website, it's Living Waters EU for Europe, livingwaterseu.com. And would you guys please pray for John and the team over there? God is using them to reach people, to train people. And let me just tell you something. Satan does not like his religion that he's done such a good job educating the world with being destroyed. And this is an absolute bomb to the evolution worldview. So pray for him and pray for his team as they're over there ministering in Europe and around the world. This really is powerful. John, is there anything else they need to know to get in touch with you, or if they want to get in touch with you?
If they want to get in touch with me, my email address, especially because I do an apologetics session every single month, if they want to be included in that. So they can just email me at John Harris. They can go John Harris, JOHNHARRIS, which is my full name, at livingwaterseu.com, which is what you mentioned a second ago. And just say, I've heard you with Eric Hovind, and I would like to be included in the monthly apologetics. They don't have to join, but we will send them an email to say, if you want to, these are the details you can have. And we talk about different topics every single month.
Love it. Fantastic. Guys, make sure you're getting in touch with John and what he does. I'm very excited, especially this one, but he does this on so many different subjects. It really is powerful. So, John, we're going to have you back on to talk about more of the things that you've dove deep into so that you can present like this. I know I'm over time. Thank you guys for hanging on social media and on our podcast. We sure do love and appreciate you tuning in to be discipled. And thank you. Special shout out to Jack Hibbs and Real Life Network for you guys taking on this program and being willing to present this truth to other people as well. We sure do appreciate it. We'll see you next week. Next week, by the way, we got a great show for you. What did the church fathers really think about Genesis. There's new arguments coming out today that say, oh, the church fathers right after Jesus and his disciples, the people that the disciples discipled, oh, they really believed in old age. They didn't believe in a young earth creation like the Bible teaches. They believe that is going to be totally debunked next week when we talk about what did the church fathers really think about Genesis. I think you're going to love that conversation. Look forward to seeing you next week. If you want the rest of this conversation, by the way, it's real simple. Come over to creationtoday.org, partner with us for any amount to help us reach the world with the truth, and you get access to everything we do, past, present, and future. So would love to have you at creationtoday.org. If you want a shortcut, creationtoday.org/partner, creationtoday.org/partner. God bless you guys. Look forward to seeing you next week. Okay, to my partners on here, I'm seeing the comments. You guys are loving this, guy, John. These guys are loving the Nate Loper. Love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, and we're just getting started. Here's what I told John, guys, to all my partners on here. I said, John, let's cover everything so that when we edit this tonight and tomorrow, you'll have one conversation that covers everything. So we're probably going to go over our 1 hour mark. If you got time to hang out, you're going to love it. If you got to go, we understand. We love you. But John, you did say, by the way, that you're going to send me this PowerPoint to send to the partners?
100%. Yes. I'll email it to you and you've got it all. You can keep it, do what you like. In fact, I'll be encouraged and blessed if you did.
That is fantastic. John, you are very, very generous. Okay, let's go through this. And by the way, this is powerful. This is an atomic bomb to the evolution worldview. How in the world do they try to come against it?
When you're doing this to the public one-to-one, sometimes they come up against it, but they do it by ignorance. They actually don't know what it's saying. They have no idea what they say. And I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you what they say. Usually you get the internet guy who thinks he knows a lot. So, because obviously everybody on the internet is an expert in everything. So they come up with absurd responses, and I'm going to show you those. Very rarely you get somebody come up with a silly response when you're talking to them in person. And then I just remind them, look, let me just be clear about this. You're not coming against John Harris. This is your guy. You're telling me your guy is bad. Look, if you don't like it, just take it to your guy. So don't argue with me. This is Haldane, and he's the evolutionist. He's the one who came up with it. And not only that, but every person you bring to the table to say has solved the problem has agreed with Haldane because they changed to a different kind of solution. So they agreed, and then they moved on to something else. So therefore, Haldane was not wrong. So you making up that Haldane was wrong in any way whatsoever means you're insulting every single scientist who agreed with the solution, which I'm going to tell you, which I'm going to show you just to blow your mind, because the solution is more absurd than the actual dilemma.
By the way, Jonathan wants to know, do we know how many generation evolutionists claim existed from an ape-like creature, Australopithecine, to modern man? So even if we give them 3 million years, would they say that was apes are populating faster than humans, so they'd put that generation mark down a little bit? Would they bring that down to like 10 years? I'm wondering how many the evolutionists would say. I mean, simple mathematics, I could do it here. I have
never met a single evolutionist who tried to put more years to what they've already got. Now, they might change their minds and add more to it, but they have never done that, and they have never changed the actual average years per generation. I've not seen it anywhere. So no one has pretended that the average generation during the chimpanzee or ape-like creature time, the average generation period was shorter, giving them more years. No one has ever done that or given themselves more years. They've always stuck to 5, 6, maybe 7 million years, but no one has gone beyond. But hey, listen, I can go 180 billion years if they want.
Yeah, exactly. Now, just so you know, so suppose it was 3 million years since ape to human, so Australopithecine, Lucy, to modern day human, and it was only 10 years per generation. Oh no, I did 10 million. Hang on just a second.
Well, that's easy. That's easy.
30,000. So 3 million divided by 10 years per generation, 300,000, excuse me. You would have 300,000 generations from Australopithecine to today. So even given the one beneficial mutation, you don't have it in 3 million years using 10 years as your as your generational time. So by the time that ape is 10 years old, it has a child. And that is consistent all the way up to today. Even doing that, it doesn't work.
Can I just take this a step further? Look at my screen right now.
Yeah.
Okay, look at my screen. It says 10 million divided by 20 years divided by 1 generation per mutation. Let's pretend we give them 1 year per generation. 1 year. No, right, 1 year. So it's 10 million divided by 1 divided by 1. What does that give you? 10 million. I need 30 million.
So even if a 1-year-old was having a child with a beneficial mutation, and that 1-year-old was having a child with a beneficial mutation, and that happened for 10 million years straight, you still don't have enough to even get 1% of the changes, let alone it's 15.
You got it. You got it. And giving them 10 million years. Eric, it's deadly. I mean, there is nothing they can do to recover from this. I'll do whatever they want. I can have the evolutionists. I say, look, sit down. What number would you like? Just invent me the number. And then sometimes they could say something like, okay, then give me 10 billion years. Oh, 20 billion years. I'd say, but the whole universe, according to you, is not that old. So, but you want 20 billion? I'll give you 20 billion. Still not.
This is so good, man. I mean, no matter what they have to come, because you know that they're going to have to posit absolute absurdity to try to get something that actually works. And that's only from an ape-like creature to a human, something that they say is very similar. That's not even getting the ape in the first place from a single-celled organism. Like
100%. Honestly, that's quicker than E. coli bacteria. I mean, what can I say? So, I mean, think about the implication. If every Christian went around saying, hey, you believe in evolution? Let me show you this. I mean, what's going to happen? They're going to turn around and say, hey, look, I can't argue against that. You're right. Evolution is bankrupt. I'm never going to believe in this thing again. But it gets really funny because in a minute, you're going to find out that even though natural selection, which is what this is all about, this is called natural selection. You don't have, because natural selection can only work with mutations. Well, there is no natural selection if there is no mutations, right? You can't select if there is no mutation, because the idea is that mutations create something new, natural select picks it up. Well, that means natural selection doesn't work anymore. You'll see in a minute, it doesn't work. But what about all these scientists that bring them up as if they've never heard of Haldane's dilemma? Well, that's embarrassing because it just tells me how uneducated they are. I can't take them seriously anymore. So if you want, I can show you how all this is done in action. I can show you a video where I've actually put it into practice and show people and you see their reaction. Are you happy with that?
I love this. Yes.
Okay, good. Well, let's jump straight there. And I think that's the video we have. So this is an example from multiple places in the UK. Okay, so it's going to be in a place called Lincoln and a place called Leicester. I went to London Speakers Corner. I've done it from there. I used an A3 printout because at the time I didn't have my PowerPoint, and it's hard to do when you're doing it from the street, in a public sort of fashion. So I put little stickers on it. So I took the stickers off every time they gave me the answer to show them what's behind it. So you have to excuse the quality of sound. We weren't that good recording sound at the time. So literally from 3 or 4 different places. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. We can talk some more after this.
Are you open-minded?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Are you willing to change your worldview when you find scientifically something true?
Yes.
Okay, because you trust and believe in science and numbers, right?
Yeah.
Evolutionists tell us that we came from ape-like creatures, agreed? Okay, good. To say. I understand. We share common ancestor with an ape-like creature? Okay, good. You said we came from animals. We're going to call that ape-like creatures. Okay? DNA is what tells us what we're made of. We've got 2 eyes, 2 hands, 10 fingers, toes, knees. Our system, immune system, vascular system, muscular system. We have systems, over a dozen of them or so, that we designed as a result of what DNA says. In fact, if you want to know, if you untangle one of those DNA from one cell that will reach about 6 or 7 feet high, if you untangle it from your entire body, you can reach from here to the moon 552,000 times. Oh, what's the number of DNA base pairs inside a human being? Guess. 30,000? Okay. You're a little bit out. It's 3 billion. Okay. Base pairs. Okay, base pairs. You're happy with that? Base pairs. What's the difference in percentage between the DNA of an ape-like creature to a human being?
I don't believe it's much.
You don't think it's much, right? Well, give us a percentage.
2%.
2%? Okay. It's very small. I'm going to say the difference is 1%. It sounds fair to me, right? I'm going to give you less difference so that the likelihood of evolution can happen. So I'm going to give 1% difference. How many base pair changes will go from here to there? How many changes will have to occur if it's 1%? So it's 1% of 3 billion. What is that? 30 million, you're nearly there. Okay, here we go. 30 million changes is what I need from here to there. You know what they say? They tell you that you have to have mutations, changes in the DNA to change something from one species to another. How many years did it take to go from here to there? 6 million. Okay, listen, 3 to 6 million, I agree with Paul. But I'm going to be nice to Paul because I like Paul and I like you all. I'm going to give you 10 million. That's good, right? Because I'm going to give you more time. All right, I'm being really good here. All right, so here we go. There is 3 million in reality, but I'm going to give you 10 million. Just to show you how absurd this theory is. How many years does it take before you reproduce and have another generation? 40? 40 years, it's good, it's good. You know what? You're not far off. I'm going to be very, very generous, Adam. I'm just going to do it to make a point here. I'm going to give you 20 years for every generation. That means you get a lot of generations for that many years, yeah? So I'm going to give you 20. You know, they tell you that DNA changes from one to another through mutations. How many beneficial mutations do we observe today?
Quite a lot.
Quite a lot? How about if I told you on camera none? That's a surprise, but I'm going to qualify that by saying without fitness costs. That means you can get a mutation that makes something work better, but in general it's worse than a normal human being who doesn't have the mutation. But I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to give you one beneficial mutation every single generation. Listen, that's really, really good. Because the actual figure from the evolutionist point of view is every 300 generations you get one. I checked it out. If you don't believe me, when you go home, check it out. If it takes 10 million years and one mutation every 20 years, then you will only get 500,000 mutations over a period of 10 million years. Now, if you're going to get 500,000 over 10 million years, then you are way off the 30 million mutations you need to create a human being. 10 million years, and you have one beneficial mutation every 20 years, you have 500,000. But how many do you need? 30 what? 30 million. Where, Adam? How are you going to move this person to that person when I need 30 million mutations, but I can only get, at best, following your own rules, believing in your own make-up stories? How are you going to change me from one of those to those with 500,000 when I need 30 million? Now listen, I promise you I made none of this up. I'm not that clever, okay? I don't go out there inventing new genetics. It's got a name. It's got the name of Holden's dilemma. This was done by an evolutionist in 1957. And another guy picked up afterwards in 1993. His name is Walt Remind, and he ironed out all these misunderstandings, and it has not been refuted since 1993. See, if Neil was only thinking science, he would say to himself today, yes, I'm going to think about this, I'm going to take this home with me, and I'm happy to give you copies of this, and I'm going to check it out. Okay, now, Adam, you did promise me one thing.
I'll be open-minded.
You said you're going to be open-minded, and if you're a neutral person who's standing there, neutral, not biased in your beliefs, not biased, if you say to me right now you're going to stick to your belief despite these figures as an engineer, then you have to be honest with me and say, I am being biased in my views.
I'm biased in my
Okay, that's it. If I could bring this to you right now and you were neutral, you didn't have your strong views, if you weren't religious about your views, it sounds to me you're as religious as I am. Do you agree? Okay, you're as religious as I am. If you didn't have your religious views, you would look at that and you would go and examine it, wouldn't you?
I want to do my research on it. That's what I...
Agreed. That's all I'm asking for you. So I really appreciate your time. Yes, Paul, put it to your... Everybody give him a big hand. For this, we want to finish this off like this. We're here to give you good news. Paul, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you. This is a gift from me to you. Give everybody a hand to Adam here. Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you for your time. I'm going to give Adam some gifts, so give me just 1 minute. This is the ultimate pack. I've thrown everything I've got in it. Okay? Scientific in every possible way. So please listen to that, and it'll be a pleasure to meet you again. Thank you. I'm John. It's a pleasure.
Dude! Oh my goodness. And boom! Grand slam, baby! It's out of the park. It's in the river. Somebody's diving for that ball right now. John, this is so, I mean, to watch it, and actually, I go on college campuses. I sent you a couple videos that I'm still working on that I haven't released yet on college campuses. I'm trying to go back to Orlando here in September, October timeframe. This, Amanda, Rachel, Marlissa, this is the next one we're doing right here. That is so powerful. That is so good.
Like, honestly, I can't wait. If you did that, I'll be so happy to see the result of that. And let me tell you how I actually start this. I stand on the box and I turn around and I say to people, who here is an atheist who's brave enough to talk to me? I want an atheist to stand on the box in front of me and show me why my belief is not true, as long as you give me 5 minutes to destroy your belief.
I just need 5 minutes, baby. That's all I need.
And I have people. In fact, one of them was on the video. He said, "I said, why did you come on the box? You haven't even tried hard enough." And the guy said, "Well, I actually stand here because I want to see how you're going to destroy evolution in 5 minutes." And that's the guy I ended up giving material to at the very end. He came forward and he said, "What's your name?" And they wanted to talk to me. And on that video, there was also one of the guys who said, "I'm going to come to your church. You've blown my mind. I'm going to come and see," because he was arguing that evolution was absolutely true, only to find out that I destroyed it in 5 minutes. And he said, "Look," I said, "Look, I'm not going to worship anything in your church. I just want to be there. I want to see where you go."
Wow.
I said,
So I love the gift idea too. So my gift is the tract or something like that, just to have a bag where it looks, I mean, that adds a huge level of love to the unbeliever that you're talking to. And I got to implement that as I go out, because that is powerful. That is so good.
Wonderful. Yes. We give them a chocolate in there as well, so that they feel like we didn't just give them Christian material. We give them chocolate, DVDs, and a Bible. We put in a Bible in there too. So yeah, we help them out. We put as much as we can.
Nate loves Nate, that is good, isn't it? Nate, that is so good. Giving them a gift. Oh man. All right. Okay. So objections to this. You take as long as you want and start telling me, here's one, and just shoot them down as you go, buddy.
All right. Okay. So what does the evolutionist come up with to dismiss this whole thing, right? Well, they say a lot of stuff, and I'm going to go through every one of them, but I can probably summarize or bring up the two main objections. These are the two main ones. The first one is they say, you creationists are so dumb. Unfortunately, they use language like that sometimes. Haldane's dilemma was resolved over 50 years ago. That's a pretty common thing they say, because you know why they do that? Because they go on Wikipedia. And they say, all you got to do is read Wikipedia. It says it's been resolved 50 years ago. Well, another one that's
the argument right there. Yes. We see that all the time. Oh, you just don't understand science. Well, you didn't explain why I was wrong. You just simply said, I don't understand science. Like, that's not an argument.
And what's funny is that if they actually understood what Wikipedia is saying, they wouldn't even bring it up, because that in itself is embarrassing, which we're going to come to in just a few minutes. And another thing they say is the single beneficial mutations are not a problem when applied to the entire population. So basically they're saying, when you add up these one by one mutation to the entire population, that's everybody, you get plenty of enough beneficial mutations. So you Christians, what's your problem? See, you don't check the facts. That's what they say. So we're gonna go through it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Now, this one might take a little bit longer than you probably wanted to take. So give me a second. Oh, by the way, these are all the other ones they come up with, which I'm going to try to answer for you as well. All 5 of them. But we'll come down in a minute. Okay. All right. So the first one.
And by the way, are those five presented by Apologia?
Yes, it is. Yes, okay. It is.
Apologia is one of our partners. He pays us every month so he can have access to all this material so he can make fun of it. So, Paul,
that's wonderful. Is he there?
I love you, buddy. Let's let this man, Paul, I hope, I really do. I hope you'll listen to this because I pray for you regularly. I know that the truth is in there somewhere and it needs to come out. Otherwise, you will have to admit you are purposefully, willfully being blinded. And man, I sure would love for you to know the truth. Okay.
Wow. Well, if he's here at the moment, I would love him to see what we've got here because it will be fantastic if we can have a discussion. All right. So you probably remember a while ago when Easy, the president of Living Waters, briefly spoke about Haldane's Dilemma. You were there. It was called Evolution Exposed. You were part of it. So was I. I spoke about life on planet. Well, this guy that we were just talking about, Apologia, run by a guy called Paul, as you know, got hold of this recording. And by the way, I like how Paul used the name to call his YouTube channel Apologia. Obviously, he's playing on Apologia. That's pretty cool. I think that's clever. I like it. Now, his banner has 3 photos on it. It's probably the photos of the people he likes the least. And Eric, you're on it. So well done.
Thank you. I think he likes me personally. I think we have a good relationship, and I genuinely love him. It's interesting that he would not have a channel if it wasn't for the apologist. So all he's doing is trying to, it's an interesting dynamic. He could not exist if we did not exist, and that's kind of funny.
Symbiotic relationship. I hear you.
It is a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? He comes across nice when they're talking, but the comments on there are not so nice. So right. I think he can do with educating the public who are listening to his videos a little bit more. Well, Paul claims he used to be a Christian. You probably know all this, Eric, but now he's on a mission to mock the Bible, Christians, and creation. He got hold of this recording from Evolution Exposed conference and made a video against Easy. And talking about Haldane's Dilemma. He called it Evolution Exposed. Very creative. I like that. It's basically a rebuttal to Haldane's Dilemma. So in this video, his guest is called Dr. Dan Stern, who says he's an evolutionary biologist who runs his own YouTube channel called Creation Myths. Did you know that one?
I don't know that guy. I don't know Dan Stern.
No, because he might have subscribed to you as well. So let me get this straight, by the way. Is Paul paying you to be on this extra bit where he gets to watch the longer version?
Yeah, so he is. Now, he's not on here today live with me, but right. He does get the recording of this when we send this out tomorrow. So he's on that list of all of our partners that are helping us reach the world with the gospel. He pays whatever he wants. I don't know what he pays, but he subscribes because we let people pay whatever they want. And people I find people are very generous when you do that. They're just like, look, we love the message. We love what you're doing here. And it's way better than trying to have like a subscription fee. So I'm like, man, just help us reach the gospel. So people with the gospel. So don't know what it is, but I know he's paying for it.
So after this, my picture might end up on there then, on their banner.
That's true.
So no doubt, it's safe to assume that these 2 guys who are criticizing Easy are not going to be completely fair, unbiased, or totally reasonable in their rebuttals, right? I'm going to go through all of these rebuttals in a minute, and unlike them, I will be fair using real science to correct them. Let's start with this one. It's only 20 seconds long, so go ahead and listen to his first rebuttal.
Move to Komura's landmark paper on neutral theory in 1968, built on Haldane's work to suggest that most molecular evolution is neutral, resolving the dilemma. Easy's silver bullet is a 60-year-old quandary that was completely resolved by the scientific community over 50 years ago.
So there you have it. Haldane's Dilemma was completely resolved by the scientific community over 50 years ago. Here's the reference he's bringing up. That's exactly what he just said. So according to this trustworthy, honorable, and totally unbiased quote in Wikipedia, Komura fixed it. He solved this dilemma. It sounds great. So what is the problem, you ask? I'm glad you asked. So here it is. Well, what they don't tell you is that Cumorah agreed with John Haldane that natural selection does not work. And this is important. He said, rapid selective evolution requires an unrealistically high rate of the beneficial mutations. Why is that important? Because this hero of theirs agreed with Haldane. So he agreed that natural selection can no longer be the mechanism for evolution. So it's dead. It's over. Which means, according to both worldviews, or both renowned geneticists, Haldane and Cumorah, natural selection doesn't work for evolution anymore. He puts an end to the idea that survival of the fittest is a viable mechanism for creating anything new in evolution. It's the end. Now, please remember, these are the people they trust. First, Haldane said it, and now Cumorah confirms it. So let's be clear. I'm going to break this down. If evolutionists accept Cumorah's solution that evolution is through neutral mutations, because that's what the quote said, if evolutionists accept that Haldane's dilemma is solved 50 years ago, like the Wikipedia says, then they have to agree that they can't produce anything new with natural selection. That's because Cumorah said it's done through neutral mutations. Natural selection does not apply or does not play a part anymore. That's because we just don't have enough beneficial mutations, and Cumorah confirmed it. It's a done deal. So these so-called scientists can jolly well stop telling our students that natural selection could possibly produce anything new, which they call evolution. I think you can put a stop to that, right?
That's a good point. Yeah, because so the very argument trying to rescue evolution from Haldane's dilemma ends up destroying the idea of natural selection, because natural selection works on beneficial mutations, and they're saying that to solve it, there's no beneficial mutations.
Well, there's a dilemma, and the dilemma is it doesn't work. And Cumorah came along and said, "Yeah, you're right, it doesn't work." So we get. I'm totally good with that. I wish they would just acknowledge that. Don't go jumping in pretending you've got a solution when you've actually agreed with Haldane. Don't make it up. Don't make up stories, right? So let's now come to Cumorah. What did Cumorah suggest instead of natural selection? He said it's not through beneficial mutations that humans get bigger and better and cleverer, but instead it happened through neutral mutations. These are mutations that are strictly neither good or bad. You with me?
Yep.
It's all neutral. Cumorah ignored all the good, bad, and ugly and kept the neutral ones. He said things get bigger and better and cleverer because all these neutral mutations. That's it. Now remember, neutral means it's neither good or bad. It's basically, it basically doesn't affect the organism. It neither improves it or hinders it. If that's the case, then how does it work? How do these natural or neutral mutations stay in the population, which we call fixed, by the way? It's called fixation. What keeps these mutations in the population? Because they're just neutral, right? With natural selection, I get it. It's a beneficial mutation. All the good ones stay in because you select them. Well, this one is neutral. So it's easy. All you need is a bit of magic and fairy dust called genetic drift. Have you come across genetic drift yet, Eric?
I've heard of genetic drift, yes.
Well, you're going to find out more about genetic drift. Well, it's basically pure luck, and I'm not kidding you. It's all they need is a bit of luck. Basically, the evolutionist is hoping for just some luck. So here's the genetic drift in action. Hey, look, if you don't believe me, just go on YouTube and type genetic drift, and you get this explanation. So here's a genetic drift in action. If you get a group of bugs that are, say, green, some of the green bugs could have become yellow because of a mutation, which is neither good or bad. It's neither beneficial or detrimental. It doesn't do anything good or bad. But the yellow ones could have survived, not because they're fitter than the green bugs, which is what natural selection teaches, but because the yellow bugs are what? They're luckier. Or because they survived some kind of natural disaster by sheer chance. That is it. There you have it, simples. This way, all the green bugs evolved to become yellow bugs. Therefore, they have evolved from green to yellow. That is it. Nothing to do with natural selection or beneficial mutation. Now, I can get my head around beneficial mutations and natural selection, but neutral mutations and genetic drift? No. And that's saying that neutral and genetic drift still causes evolution. That's where it's like, well, you didn't go anywhere. That's exactly right, Eric. I mean, it's upsetting. It's really upsetting to say, because this is what our students are being taught. That's what they call the theory of neutral evolution in a nutshell. That's how Moto Komura solved the problem. Basically, got rid of natural selection and introduced neutral selection. Well, bravo. Now, if you believe in the theory of neutral evolution, then you are called a neutralist. Let's get some terminologies in there for you. Not a naturalist, but a neutralist. All right? Now,
which ends up neutering evolution. Sorry, couldn't help myself.
Oh, that was good. And that was not even prompted. You just came out naturally with that, Eric. That was fantastic. Well,
you're a neuterist. You're a neuterist, yes.
And those who believe in natural selection, well, what are they called? They're called the selectionists because they believe in natural selection. So, by the way, neutralists still believe in natural selection, right? I'm not trying to misrepresent them, but not in terms of having the power to create anything new like selectionists do. And of course, they are right. Natural selection couldn't create anything new because natural selection just selects from what's there. And there aren't enough mutations to add anything new to select from. The new theory immediately created a conflict between those that are called naturalist and those that are called neutralist. So the neutralist and the selectionist. So the selectionists, those who believe in natural selection, said, hey, this is rubbish. Neutral mutations can't do anything new. And of course, they're right. But then the neutralists come along and say, hey, wait, the natural selection through beneficial mutation is rubbish. It can't do anything new. And they are right, too. So they're both right about each other. Neither one of these silly theories can create anything new. No wonder they all disagreed with each other. This was like permanent disagreement all the time. There was like a fight. So all this means that the brand new, shiny, and wonderful theory called neutral theory of evolution that Komura came up with was given as the main reason why all these different forms of life exist instead of natural selection. So they say this is why we have a variety of things, because basically they were just all lucky. They had a neutral mutation, and by sheer accident or luck, they were selected to be what they are today.
Mark in the comments said, they're both right about being wrong. It's like, yeah, that is so true. They're both right about being wrong.
I'm loving that quote. I'm stealing it from my next talk.
That is good. They're both right about being wrong. Credit that to Mark Mundy. I like that. Thank you, Mark.
Good job. Good job. So, I mean, look, you have to think about this. This applies to things like birds, right? Now, I mean, do I have time to take you through this? I've got all night.
Yeah, I told you let's get it all out here. Let's get it all out.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. So, I mean, let me just examine one flying animal, right? Birds are so lucky that it's by pure chance they're perfectly balanced weight and they're centered under their wings. The reason they can use their feathers to create wide surface area, which gives them maximum lift, is because of luck. The reason why they have feathers in their tail to control navigation is because of luck. The reason why each feather is connected to a muscle, which lets them move and turn each feather separately to even make their flights possible, is because of luck. The reason why the central vein of each of the feathers is hollow, making them extra light, is because of luck. The reason why each feather is crisscrossed with barbs and barbules to act like strong Velcro, giving the extra strength, well, guess what? It's because of luck. The reason why they have hollow bones supported with struts and bars for extra strength and to make them lightweight and to help with oxygen during their flight, well, it's because of luck. The reason why they have powerful breast muscles to pull their wings down is because of luck. The reason why they have an ingenious pulley system to pull the wings back down again is because of luck. The reason why they have this high performance breathing system is very unique to all the animals, which use muscles to pump this straight into their air sacs and hollow bones. Well, believe it or not, it's all because of luck. Lucky. It's just lucky.
I'm lucking this, man. I am lucking this.
I mean, I don't know how to say this with a straight face, right? I mean, we haven't even talked about the human brain. So why did they buy into this nonsense? Now, Eric, you and I know why they bought into this nonsense, right? What's the alternative? They're going to...
I'm holding it right here, and they don't want this.
Just like that. Because the people who don't believe in God, they end up believing in anything, even if it's absurd. just like the Bible says. They professed to be wise, they became fools. Secondly, because if they don't accept this, then they just simply have to reject evolution, and they're not ready to do that, right? I mean, they have to agree with Haldane and become creationists, and they're not going to do it.
At least an intelligent designist. I mean, they'd have to at least get there.
Exactly right. Now, you know what? This is not the end of the story. It really isn't. And allow me to explain what Cumorah actually came up with, which is more absurd than what I just told you, right? Cumorah did something that got people confused. They got confused because Cumorah did something very naughty. He presented his figures in a confusing way, which was not immediately obvious to everyone. You see, unlike Haldane, who did the right thing, he calculated the beneficial mutations by calculating evolution cost or substitutional cost. We didn't talk about it, but it's there. We can talk about it anytime. Cumorah did it backwards. That means Haldane calculated what we see in nature, and from that, he worked out what we get. All right, so that sounds pretty reasonable to me. And that's called, all right, are you sitting down? It's called substitutional cost, which is easy to see when it's gone wrong, right? But Cumorah muddied the water by presenting his figures in terms of evolution load. So one of them was cost, the other one was load. So what does that mean? Well, it means that Cumorah looked at what we need, not what we get, to make a human, and changed the figures, assuming that we get that many neutral mutations, okay? And to make it more obscure, he presented the results as a formula. That's not only confusing, but it's also not immediately obvious he manipulated the figures to work. You see, when Haldane presented his figures, it was easy to see what was happening, but it wasn't so easy with Cumorah. Unlike Haldane, the average person couldn't possibly work out if Cumorah's figures were right or wrong. Basically, Cumorah worked it backwards. He used the word load instead of cost, and the experts say this: substitutional load assumes that evolution occurs within the available time, and then it calculates the differences in survival rates that would be required. So what is it saying? This is saying with substitutional load, which is what Cumorah did, you first assume that evolution is true, then you see how much time you have, you see how many mutations you need, and then guess what? You make the figures fit. Now, Eric, you and I know that's got a name. It's called cheating, right?
Yeah, I was like, first, so they're assuming evolution happened first.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know about you, I'm seeing a huge problem. They're assuming evolution had an end in mind, and evolution is supposed to be like random. Like we don't know where this is going. We don't know where these mutations are going to take us. We have no direction. So it's assuming direction inside of that formula as well. That's a huge problem.
And then it's going up and saying, well, how many neutral mutations I need, and I'm assuming they're all good enough. And then I'm saying genetic drift, luck kicked in and solved it.
Wow.
And then, if that's not bad enough, they started swapping and changing the terms to confuse absolutely everyone. Evolutionists started misusing the word load and cost, causing even more confusion. So they started to use the words load, which means the opposite of cost, interchangeably. So now nobody could work out what they're talking about. Well, this is not education. This is just confusion. It's just a complete mess. They thought he did something useful, but no one can dare stand up and tell him because they can't work out where it went wrong. But let's ignore all of that, because I always do that, don't I? Going to be.
You are so gracious, John. You are so gracious.
Thank you, Eric. At least somebody has noticed by now. Is this being recorded? I want to make sure my wife watching this.
We are creating your humility award as we speak. We're making that right now.
I'm humble enough to wear it, Eric. You just send it. So let's ignore that the terms were confusing. Let's ignore that Cumorah worked it all backwards and confused everyone. Let's pretend that Moto Cumorah was right about the numbers. You can't get fairer than that, right? Now, according to this theory, how many neutral mutations do we need? Or how many neutral mutations did he say we need to make an ape-like creature evolve to a human? Well, without boring you with all the details, and it is quite boring, the theory suggests, or Moto Cumorah said, that we need 182 neutral mutations per generation to make it work. I don't need to tell you that there are so many problems with this, but I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
There is problem number one. Problem number one, we don't get 182 neutral mutations per generation. Did I tell you he made them up? We just don't get it. There is no 182 neutral mutations per generation. Ask me later how many they are. But for now, we don't get it. But even if we did get it, because remember, I'm kind and generous and humble to tell him he can have it, right? But even if he did get 182 neutral mutations per generation, it's still not going to help Camorra. Poor old Camorra. That's because getting 182 neutral mutations per generation could cause something called a disaster in the population if it was used the way Camorra wants us to use it. Okay? So why is that? Why is that a disaster? Because, now listen to this, according to Camorra, not according to John Harris, according to Camorra's own words, 90% of any mutation, 90% would be harmful once they get translated into a protein. There is a name for this. It's called expressed. So once you express it into a protein, 90% of any mutation becomes harmful. But these neutral mutations have to be expressed. Otherwise, nothing changes. Because if you're not going to produce protein, you're not going to produce anything new in the organism, right? So it stands at 90% mutation being harmful. So let's work it out. If 90% of neutral mutations become harmful when expressed, then if you had 182 so-called neutral mutations, we will end up with how many harmful ones? 164. Well, that's the majority of them. Is that a problem? Yes.
That's a problem.
Well, first of all, you don't...
So how many mutations would you need per generation to get the 10%, the 182 being the 10%? You'd take that times 10, right? You'd need...
100.
Do you understand what I'm asking? How would you get 180?
Yes, I do. You would need 202. You would need 202. No, you're right. That's the other way around.
No, way more. Yeah.
Okay. It is the opposite of
182 is 10% of what? So multiply 182 is 10% of 1,820.
1,208, 1,820. Is that possible? Let me just see.
Yeah, 1,820 divided by 10 is 182. Yeah. So you need 1,820 mutations, majority of which are wrong or bad, and 182 are good.
Absolutely right, Eric. I'm loving this because you're really paying attention. This is fantastic. You promised that you will sleep during my talk, but you're proving to be totally awake.
I am loving this. I'm like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be ripping my hair out at why do people still believe in evolution? But I've been doing that for 25 years. So
of course you are. Of course you are. Now, let me tell you, right? This gets worse, in case you didn't think it did. This is 164 times higher than the rate that it would normally cause species to become extinct. They call this era catastrophe.
Wow.
That many bad mutations would destroy humanity, right? That means humanity will be just extinct. In fact, species would normally disappear with much less rate of harmful mutations. In fact, it's usually one. It's usually one, right? If you have that consistently every generation, right? But he's saying consistently every generation, I'm having 164. That's 164 times lower than what this guy is saying that would cause era catastrophe. This is terrible.
I have added this to PowerPoints before, and I keep forgetting which PowerPoint I put it in, but I need to send it to you. On the United States Government Health website, they have a chart. It's a PDF you can get. They have a chart for every single human chromosome. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way up, and then the X and the Y. And the chart shows if there is a mutation right here, here's the disease you get. If there's a mutation here, it's nothing but the diseases. And it's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different diseases that have been associated with a genetic mutation right here on the chromosome right here. And so I need to get that to you because that'd be great to show.
Yes.
This results in this one mutation right here results in this disease. And those are diseases from which people survive. Those aren't even listing the ones that people die, that we don't know about because they die and we don't know.
You know what, Eric? I feel that sometimes the evolutionist world is different to reality. It's almost like there is this world where the evolutionists make a claim which doesn't match reality, but they go with it. It's such a distorted, twisted reality that has nothing to do with the facts. And you know what? It would be okay if it was just them, right? But they're teaching this to our kids. They graduate with this kind of silly knowledge. So nobody's being educated, right? So let me recap. Problem number one, we don't get 182 neutral mutations per generation. Problem number two, if we did get 182 neutral mutations per generation, then they get translated into a protein, while we stand more over 16,000% chance of going extinct, according to Kimura's own words.
Those are pretty good chances, let me tell you.
I mean, and this is what they're priding themselves. When they are telling me Moto Kimura solved this problem, they are saying all this junk, but ignoring what the consequences are. So the very solution Kimura offers to evolve life is what kills it. It's strange that any evolutionist would want to proudly suggest that Kimura solved the problem. It shows that they know very little about Kimura's theory or even Haldane's dilemma. And if that's not bad enough, problem number three is that Kimura relied on the rest of his theory to work with sheer luck, right? When he talked about genetic drift. It's basically one big gambling machine. It has nothing to do with science. It shouldn't be called neutral theory of evolution. It should be called the fantasy theory of evolution. I checked it out. I think I'm right. I like how the Oxford Dictionary defines the word fantasy. It says a pleasant situation that you imagine, but that is unlikely to happen.
That's perfect. That is perfect.
That's what it's called from now on. It's the fantasy theory of evolution. Evolutionists love pleasant stories. They're unlikely to be true, right? It's like a fairy tale. How desperate do you have to be to make up a story like that? Now, Eric, I know what you're thinking because I'm reading your mind. Apart from being humble, I read minds. You're thinking this. Why doesn't somebody say something? Well, first of all, I am somebody and I am saying something. That counts, right?
It counts.
But do you want to hear about people jumping in and rebuking Kimura?
Let's hear it.
All right.
Somebody had to look into that.
All right. So when Kimura published his theory in 1968, which was just more than 10 years since Haldane's dilemma was introduced by John Haldane, which obviously meant that they were very desperate. I mean, it's been going on for 10 years and creationists probably completely missed it anyway. He basically said, well, if beneficial mutations don't work, then it must have been neutral ones. Is that how science works? If it's not A, it has to be B. What about C and D and E? What about neither? Well, within 7 months of that paper, September 1968, a British theoretical mathematical evolutionary biologist and geneticist called John Maynard Smith, who was a selectionist, that means he's a guy who believes in natural selection, criticized Moto Kimura in a scientific paper. He said, Moto's calculations are erroneous. Well, of course it's erroneous. He made them up. John Maynard Smith said, Kimura assumptions may be seriously wrong by several orders of magnitude, and that Kimura's estimate of evolution may be too low by several orders of magnitude. Well, let me translate that for you. He's saying Kimura's figures are all messed up. I'm simple guy. That's basically what he's saying. Go and trust the guy. It's all messed up. And then 6 months after that, March 1969, another scientist kicked in called Peter O'Donnell, criticized John Maynard Smith for criticizing Kimura. He said, John Maynard escapes from Haldane's dilemma by using a model that allows selection, that's natural selection, to act on very many loci than in the model of selection for an optimum. But I believe his model is unrealistic as Haldane's, which he criticizes Kimura for using. Now I'm going to translate. He's saying it's all well and good for John Maynard criticizing Kimura, but his solution was no better because John Maynard used natural selection to solve the problem using silly big numbers, which you will find many evolutionists today will try to do who don't know anything about this dilemma, by the way. And of course, Peter O'Donnell was right. So they fought over this theory back and forth to solve Haldane's dilemma for decades. On one hand, if they accept Haldane's dilemma, evolution is doomed. But on the other hand, guess what? If they accept Comora's solution, then it's no better because evolution is still doomed. So whatever they do, evolution ends up being doomed. In 1983, well, Comora didn't give up, did he? 14 years later, he wrote a book called The Neutral Theory of Molecular Bioevolution. Now, this is not a cheap book. I resented a little bit because I had to pay for it, and I got it. You know, when a book is more than like 50 pounds or 70 pounds, then it's just too much.
Yes.
But I'm doing my research, so I have to get the book. In his opening, the very first sentence of his preface, it says, he literally says why he wrote the book. His first few words were, the book represents my attempt to convince the scientific world that the main cause of evolutionary change at the molecular level, changes in the genetic material itself, is random fixation of selective neutral or nearly neutral mutants rather than positive Darwinian selection. I'm going to translate this for you. He's saying, I don't believe Darwinian natural selection works. That's what he's saying, right? And I'm hoping to convince you that a neutral theory of evolution is the way to go. He's basically destroyed any hope that Darwinian evolution by natural selection could possibly be true. He said goodbye to Darwinian selection right there in his book, which proves Haldane was right all along. How many creationists knew this, right? How many of us? It's just heartbreaking to know that this is happening and right under our noses. Well, fast forward exactly 50 years from when Comora first wrote his paper on neutral evolution, theory of evolution, to May 2018, which is recent, at Oxford Academic. Two scientists, Kern and Hahn, came out and criticized Comora. That was a very brave thing to do, by the way. It's kind of like criticizing the Pope, you know, in your religion. They say in this paper, in this perspective, we evaluate the explanatory power of the neutral theory of molecular evolution. 50 years after its introduction by Comora, we agree that the neutral theory was supported by what? Unreliable theoretical and empirical evidence from the beginning. And that in light of modern genome scale data, we can firmly reject its universality. Well, what are you? So the theory was based on unreliable information and that we should reject it. Now, wait a minute. Do you mean Comora didn't actually solve the problem? What do you mean? You mean Comora made things up? What happened to doing good, honest scientific experiments these days? These guys went on to say, we believe that the neutral theory has been overwhelmingly rejected, not just a little bit, but completely. And that as a field, we must continue to develop alternative theories of molecular evolution. Now, let me translate this again. He's saying Comora's theory was rubbish. We rejected, others rejected, and we need to have a better solution. Well, guess what? Not only was Haldane right, but now we still don't have a solution for this evolution theory. So Comora didn't solve anything. We're back to square one. Evolution is dead again. But only 6 months later, I'm sorry, I'm really going to bore you now. Okay, we're coming to the end. Don't worry, Eric. We're coming to the end. I'm just pointing out the absurdity. Now, you know, it's just upsetting to hear evolutionists respond to this as if they know what they're saying without looking into the details. They spent no more than 5 minutes. I don't know what website they looked at. I don't know what book they read. Spent no time criticizing this before they came back with their refutation. So only 6 months later, in November 2018, can you guess what happened? A new paper came out criticizing Kern and Hahn's criticism. It's like a circus but run by clowns. They keep going back and forth. They keep changing their minds. It's worse than the English weather. Have you been to England yet, Eric?
I've stopped by one time on my way to Israel, but I haven't gotten to hang out with you guys over there, which I want to do, by the way. I'd love to do
Let's do it. You know, Eric, you tell me you're coming, and we will just lay down the red carpets as you land. It'll be fantastic. Now, all the people who understand this theory point out clearly that it's far from being settled. This website called Science Direct talks about different authors who discuss this theory. They openly say at the core of the dispute is neutral theory of molecular evolution. Did you miss it? It says it's a dispute. Guys, Comora never solved anything. He just created more problems like they always do, right? They try to solve anything. The one and only thing we can all be sure of is that Haldane was right. and he's still right today. They've all been criticizing each other for decades. There were many people involved, all putting their pennies worth. By the way, I have most of these papers, and it cost me a fortune. It never occurs to any of them that maybe, just maybe, Eric, this evolution idea could actually be false.
Exactly. And that's what makes me so crazy in that, because it is a religious worldview. This is not a science. Look at all those papers arguing, how do we rescue evolution? They never question, should we question evolution? It's how do we rescue it?
And you know what? It's not rescued. So what now? It's not rescued.
Yeah.
What's the conclusion? Well, whatever Camorra came up with to fix the problem, whether true or false, one thing is for sure, Haldane was and still is right. The fact that Camorra tried to fix this means that Haldane had to be right. Otherwise, what is he trying to fix? But the fact that he didn't fix it means that the whole idea of evolution is dead. The whole idea is dead. So whichever way you look at it, though, evolution through natural selection is certainly dead. And it could never be used ever again to explain how evolution supposedly happened. It's finished. But the real annoying thing is that apparently no one sent that memo to any of our science teachers or our school professors or people who write our education books or those who make scientific TV programs or our museums to tell them that evolution through natural selection is dead. Someone send them that memo. Someone tell them. And Eric, the worst of them all is Richard Dawkins.
Yeah.
Who seems completely oblivious to the whole debate for a man who believes in science. And also he seems totally oblivious to Haldane's dilemma that says that natural selection doesn't work anymore, regardless of whether Camorra solved it or not. How do I know this? Well, I have a video from BBC in 2015 that tells me how an eye has been evolved. Can you guess what Richard Dawkins is going to use?
Natural selection and mutation.
You bet he is. Of course, 2015, we already knew that Haldane's dilemma was in full action. But Richard Dawkins, bless him, he has been tired and asleep, and he missed the study where they spoke about this. This is a 1-minute video. You tell me, shall I play it, or do you want me to?
Absolutely, I want to see it.
Okay, 1-minute video. Here it comes.
The eye really is extraordinary, but can something so complex evolve in gradual stages?
Richard, the eye is such a complex structure. I can understand why some people find it hard to believe it evolved out of nothing.
Even Darwin commented on its complexity, didn't he?
Yes, Darwin said that it was impossible to imagine.
So, what would the first step be?
That could be the first step.
Okay.
But if you imagine proper man-made lens,
Bring the bag forward a bit. There, perfect.
that's not what you might call a real lens. Think of that as just a blob of gunge. Once you've got that, then because it works a bit better than nothing at all, you've got the raw material for natural selection to go to work.
You've got what?
Now, I remember watching that documentary when it came out, and I'm like, this is so stupid. As soon as you get this little blob, that's all you need. And then look, it could be in part of this concave little cell that happened to be concave. And if a little blob involved in front of it, who knows, maybe the receptors might actually be able to start seeing. And now natural selection can let that take over. And I'm just going, that is a stretch.
Well, how many mutations does it need, right? We have 127 million light-sensitive cells in our eyes. Is that 127 million mutations? Well, let's work that one out, shall we? It's like 1 billion years from now, if it's going to be every 300 generations, right?
Just to get an eye, just to get the light-sensitive cells in the back of the eye, let alone the lens and everything else that makes the eye.
It's just embarrassing. He's promoting the idea that through millions of beneficial mutations and through natural selection, evolution makes an eye. Now, that flies in the face of Haldane's work, who said it's not possible since 1957. It also flies in the face of Camorra's work, the evolutionist hero who agreed with Haldane that beneficial mutations can create anything. And it also flies in the face of all these scientists who had anything good to say about neutral theory of evolution. I can't tell whether Dawkins is just being ignorant or straightforward deceitful. Which one is it?
Great question. Great question. He is certainly blinded to the truth, if I can use that terminology after talking about the eye. Amanda, great point.
Eric, The problem is I don't know if it's deliberate. I don't know if it's ignorance or deliberate. Did he really not know, and which makes him ignorant, or is he being deliberately deceitful? Both seems like the kind of thing you don't want the person to have when he's teaching you science.
Yeah.
So was Haldane's dilemma solved 50 years ago? I think we've nailed this one.
No.
We can honestly say it's not even close, right? And we still haven't got a working theory for evolution. Today, it doesn't work. So Christians, this is another tool for your books. Use it. Get out there. And you know what? You can genuinely now use scientific facts to be upset when somebody stands up and says it all happened through natural selection. All you got to say is, what about Haldane's dilemma? Are you simply saying he was an idiot? Because from what I know is that you all called him amazing and super clever. So he's either an idiot or clever. Which one is it? I think he's clever. I'm going to be nice. It's kind. Let's be kind to the guy because he's obviously clever. He's worked something out. He still died as an evolutionist. At least he was, honest about it.
Exactly. And that's the difference. He was trying to be intellectually honest and go, we have a problem here. I still believe it, but we got a problem. Okay. And what other? Yeah. We're going to be here for all day long if you don't get to all these. What other ones do we got?
It's true. It's true. So the next thing they say is, you creationists are so dumb. These single mutations are not a problem when applied to the entire population. All right. So, you can see the logic behind that, right? You say, well, there's a whole logic, loads of population out there. Well, if they can all have mutations, then clearly altogether accumulates to a big number, doesn't it? Well, going back to the evolutionist guru we have from Pologia on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, who commented on Easy's talk on Haldane's dilemma, this is how they phrased it. So this is 20 seconds long. Let's go for it.
The first problem with this math is that evolution is a massively parallel process. Within each generation, you don't have one person or one lineage mutating and potentially stumbling upon beneficial mutations. You have the entire population, everyone experiencing mutations all at the same time. The framing of the argument as it's done here assumes that each mutation must occur one at a time, and only after mutation number 10,563 has occurred and fixed in the population can mutation number 10,564 appear. That's not how evolution happens.
Well, he's an evolutionary biologist, a doctor at that. You're not going to question it when somebody like that tells you something like that, are you? Well, unfortunately, this is something that happens all the time. People say these things, but they have no idea about Haldane's work. What's confusing about this person is his title. I expect it from the average Joe guy, but not from a guy who's got the doctor title in their name. So I'm going to show you, this happened to me during open air as well. So I'm going to just show you it does happen, and it makes sense for you to have an answer to this. So here's the video of me doing it during open air. Someone said exactly that from the crowd. And by the way, if you're doing open air on the box and you're talking to someone who's standing on the opposite box, or somebody standing in front of you, try to stay focused on that person. Don't get sidetracked by people who shout from the side. Otherwise, you'll be drifted from one person to another. And it's also disrespectful towards the person you're talking to. And it also looks like you're arguing with people from the crowd rather than debating or discussing with them. All right. So you kind of got to follow some etiquette. And this is 25 seconds long. And this is what happened to me.
You get per generation.
Your argument is valid for one breeding pair.
Right.
What's
your name again? Ken?
Occurring every year, every day.
We're gonna talk in 1 minute. We're gonna talk
3 million years.
Okay.
That's how you get cumulative change.
We're gonna do this in 1 minute. Right, Adam, I'm gonna focus on you because we're gonna be talking to one person at a time. All right?
All right. Have you had that before, Eric? You get you're talking from the crowd shout?
Yep.
How do you handle it? Do you respond to one person to another, or do you focus on one?
Situationally, it's different depending on the situation. What I'm doing, it's sometimes I might go, "He's got a great question. Do you want an answer for that?" And so I'm still trying to, but agreed.
Like
so
So, by the way, I was once at Speaker's Corner down in London, and I don't know if you've ever watched the video. It's chaotic when people are shouting all at the same time and they're talking back and forth at the same time, totally disrespectful. Well, when I went down there once, I actually ended up on a box. I wasn't intending to. I just went down there to see what's going on. I found myself standing on a box. There was a Christian. He didn't know how to handle the Muslims. So this is what happened. The guy, he knew I was from Living Waters, so he trusted me. And he said, "Why won't you stand on the box and take all these, what's going on?" I said, "Sure, I will." So I went on the box. They all started shouting. And I said, "Hey, we're going to have a deal. Can you all listen for a second? You raise your hand if you want to ask a question."
And it just helped it. Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, I got to tell you, now these are wild people, right? I didn't expect it for one moment to work. And literally, like in a school, they're raising their hands, asking a question and bringing their hand down.
That's good. Oh, that's good.
I did not see that coming. I thought that was hilarious. It made me laugh. After like 3 or 4 hours of doing that, standing up, I got hungry and thirsty and I felt I had to go. So I stepped down, and because it was not chaotic, I hugged them all. And then I said, "I'm taking my wife for a meal. She deserves this after all this." Okay, so if someone wants to talk to me, I make them wait until it's their turn. And only if they're willing to stand on the box. Because I don't like to kind of start arguing with people and different people in the crowd. Now, This guy said from the side, "Your argument is valid for one breeding pair, not simultaneous breeding pairs occurring everywhere, every day, every second, with mutations stacking up over 3 million years. That's how you get cumulative 30 million mutations." So what is he saying? He's saying, you're not taking the entire population into account. This is what they're both saying, by the way. So it's different when you take the entire population into account, who are all producing mutations at the same time. But this is really bad, because what they're really saying is that Haldane, listen to this, Eric, are you ready? Haldane forgot to take into account the entire population as a whole. He just took one male and one female and forgot everyone else. Is that likely? I mean, these guys are also claiming Kimura was so dumb, he forgot to tell Haldane to include the population as a whole. Not only that, but he's also saying that every scientist that looked into this for more than half a century didn't realize or think for one moment of pointing out to Haldane or Kimura and say, "Hey guys, this is not really a dilemma. Just take the whole population into account and then smoke your cigar," you know? Yeah. If Haldane really did forget to take the entire population into account, then this wouldn't be a dilemma, would it? It doesn't make sense. Now, let's be clear, though. This is a parallel process that happens to the entire population. That's not the problem. The problem is once a beneficial mutation happens, you want those who have the mutations to all outlive the ones that don't have the mutations, whoever they are, right? Doesn't matter who they are. Those without the mutations are no good and take up resources, and they must go. That process must then repeat itself across the entire population again and again. Each generation without a beneficial mutation must die, and the ones with the beneficial mutations, well, whoever they are, however many of them they are, must survive. That's what Haldane was talking about. And besides, he took everything into account. I don't have time to take you through every one of those processes, but in fact, no, here it is. He took everything into account. There we go. And that's how he came to the 300 generations, one mutation per 300 generation, because he took everything into account, what it takes for them to survive, what it takes for them to outlive somebody else. And there's this thing called fixation. That means the gene that's surviving this mutation has to be fixed in the population. That takes time. Haldane knew this, right? So the only people who don't know this are the people who don't study genetics. But this other guy that was accusing Easy of getting it wrong, I assume he studies genetics, right? So without going through every one of those, in Haldane's 14-page paper, he deals with this dilemma. He mentions the fact that he is addressing the entire population more than 30 times. Now think of how embarrassing that would be if Haldane, who's a population geneticist, actually forgot to take the entire population into account. That would be absurd. Check out these ridiculously complicated formulas. Do you think he would need these complicated formulas if it was just talking about mutations between just one male and one female without taking the entire population into account? If Haldane really missed something as obvious as that, what do you think scientific community would say? Let's
They
be
would
honest.
be laughing at him. They'd just mock him to scorn if he forgot that. Yeah.
Absolutely, Eric. They wouldn't tell him, they wouldn't call it Haldane's dilemma, would they? They would call it Haldane's biggest misunderstanding.
Yeah, Haldane's stupidity, exactly. Yes.
Haldane's dumb inability to work out mutations across the population theory.
Yeah, exactly.
It took them over 10 years to address the problem. Think about how embarrassing that would be if Kimura came along and tried to solve the problem, but didn't realize that Haldane actually forgot the obvious. That wouldn't make Haldane a super clever guy that everybody says he is, right? That would also make Kimura just as dumb for not noticing. So this evolutionary biologist we just talked about on YouTube is basically telling us that he's better than Haldane, and he's better than Kimura, and he's better than every scientist that came after them to solve the problem. What a crazy thought. What a crazy thing to say. Now, don't get me wrong. If this is John Harris working out these figures, then I get it. I get it. I could have missed something as obvious as that, right? But we're not talking about John Harris. We're talking about the world-leading population geneticist who ever lived in the last 60 years. How disrespectful to even suggest that. Right, Eric?
Yes.
Now, listen, in fact, anyone who's doubting this should visit Evolutionist Holy Scripture. Where is that? It's Wikipedia.
Nate Loper said, I prefer to call it Wikipedia. I like that.
I'm taking that into my notes.
I like it.
It obviously clearly points out that Haldane took the entire population into account. Look, that's Wikipedia. Even Wikipedia said they took it into account, right? In fact, it wasn't a creationist who called it the dilemma. It was an evolutionist called Lee Van Valen in 1963 who coined this phrase. And what did he say? He called it the dilemma for the population. Why is this evolutionist in Wikipedia talking about the dilemma for the population if it's not a dilemma for the population?
Great
And
question.
why are they panicking? Why are they panicking, trying to solve this problem if it's not a problem? I mean, think about how this guy answered the question. He answered it like, you're forgetting to take the whole population into account. Excuse me? Would you like to go and talk to Haldane? He's the guy. Now, suggesting that this is not a dilemma by this person on YouTube makes this problem even more embarrassing to the evolutionists, because either he is wrong or everyone else is wrong. Either way, someone is wrong. Right. Now, this doesn't speak very well of evolutionists who can't seem to fix the problem, by the way. And I wonder what they're teaching our students in colleges these days and universities. Are they graduating with this mentality where they think something and therefore it's true? They think it. Now, I've got a few more things to say, if you're still not in a coma, but it won't take long. Even when Kimura was addressing this problem, he based it on the entire population. So Kimura was no fool. When John Maynard Smith criticized Kimura, he discussed the effect it has on the entire population. I hope this guy is listening. When Peter O'Donnell criticized John Maynard Smith, he talked about it, about how natural selection acted on the population. In 2018, when Kern and Hahn criticized Kimura for his neutral theory, guess what? They talked about the effect this has on the entire population. Even when the paper against Kern and Hahn was published, they talked about how the natural and neutral theory of evolution affect the entire population. I don't know what else I can say. When I first discovered this YouTube channel, I took each claim this guy made and responded to each one of them one by one on his channel. I was hoping to start off a debate somehow, but nothing happened. I was even nice. I was even nice about it. So, I'm happy to do some more. I mean, if you, as you know, there are 5 others, but none of them are as long as this. I can assure you, they're all much quicker. So I won't keep you here.
Let's hit some more. I'm still recording, and I told, hey, partners, hang out as long as you want. I get it. I told you this would be long, so let's hit all of them. So we got everything covered here.
I'm going to do them really quick. For those who are hanging around, don't think I'm going to take that long for each one of those. Some of those are quick, and in fact, it's going to be just as quick as it took me to respond to them on their own channel. So this is what they've got on their own channel, which I have no response for yet. Okay, so this is what I said to this particular comment they made. Evolution is a massively parallel process within each generation. You don't have one person or one lineage mutating and potentially stumbling upon a beneficial mutation. You have the entire population. Everyone is experiencing mutations all at the same time. So this is how I responded. I said, this is indeed a very confusing statement. Anyone who studies population genetics and is familiar with Haldane's work would not make such a statement. Therefore, please clarify. Are you suggesting that Haldane did not take the entire population into consideration when calculating beneficial mutations in the population? What is it? I have no response that I know about. And then he said, even Leigh Van Vallen acknowledged this in his paper. The fact that Mota Kimura felt he had to resolve this problem proves that Haldane couldn't have forgotten about this parallel process and include the entire population in his formula. Otherwise, Kimura would have corrected him. In fact, why would John Maynard, Smith, Peter O'Donnell, and various other scientists, I can name a few more if you want, call it a dilemma if it's a simple matter of including all these parallel processes? This seems misleading and confusing. Please explain. And to be honest with you, the whole idea of evolution is all of it misleading and confusing because they don't make anything clear. It's just weird that anyone would try to recover from this dilemma by saying evolution is a parallel process. If he could really solve this dilemma by simply saying it's a parallel process, then without a doubt, this guy is a genius. And it should be the world-renowned scientist like Haldane for this insightful suggestion and go down in history as the one who solved Haldane's dilemma, right? He wasn't the one who went down in history saying he solved it. I think it's safe to say that John Haldane, who is a population geneticist, along with all his peers, took the entire population into account. And there you have it. I ended this particular section. I think this is just about everything that covers this particular question. I have to be honest with you. If it wasn't for our friends at Pologia YouTube channel, this would have been a very much shorter video. They provided me with the material. I'm thankful for what they've done, to be honest, because it's going to help me address all these points, because some things you just think of yourself. What are they possibly going to say? But you know what really is upsetting is that their channel is full of ignorant, uneducated atheists who take a great deal of pleasure insulting Christians in their comment section, especially on this topic, which I'm very disappointed about. I would have expected more, I'll be honest with you. So, we can go next. If you have some questions in the questions section, then please tell me. I'll be happy to address them.
No, let's hit those on. I do have one. You're done. I found my my charts from the health.gov website that show all the diseases that come from mutations on the chromosome. So I have that, and I'll show everybody that. Oh,
fantastic. I'd love that. Share it with me by email as well if you want, or somewhere. Yeah. Okay, let's look at what else they have to say to dismiss Haldane's dilemma. This is a little bit longer. It's less than a minute, though. Here it comes.
The math here ignores two important aspects of how evolution works, and this is the fundamental problems with arguments like this one. But before I get into those problems, I'll start by noting that Haldane's dilemma refers to Haldane's determination that under a very specific set of conditions, there is a limit to the rate at which beneficial mutations can accumulate within a population. In his own writings, Haldane describes a number of situations in which his framework does not apply, and subsequent developments in evolutionary theory, like neutral theory, have further limited the degree to which his work is generally applicable. So claiming, all the other problems aside, that Haldane's limit imposes some kind of universal or generalizable limit on the rate of evolution is itself not a valid claim.
Okay, it all sounds fantastic when you hear it, right? So I'll go through them quickly, okay? He said Haldane's dilemma refers to Haldane's determination that under a specific set of conditions, there is a limit to the rate at which beneficial mutations can accumulate within a population. Okay, so I left this comment on his YouTube saying, this seems confusing. Please provide references from Haldane's paper that clearly specifies these conditions. Having read the paper myself, I can't see any specific set of conditions that exclude mammals or vertebrates within the general population. A direct quote would be helpful. Honestly, if somebody gives you a quote which you can't find, then, it would be nice to make a reference to it. Look, professional people, when they make a quote saying what Haldane said, they would quote the page, the reference, and things like that, so you can read it and find out what it is. But if he's talking about the limit to the rate at which beneficial mutations can accumulate, then yes. If we're going to take the Haldane's actual complaint, well, the limit is one beneficial mutation every 300 generations. But he's making it sound like that limit is not the problem. But that limit is the problem, unless he's talking about something else.
That's the whole reason it's a dilemma. Exactly.
100%, Eric. And, like I said, as you can see, every response I'm giving a reference with it because I want people to know I'm not making things up. I think it's only fair that other people do the same. He then said in his own writings, Haldane describes a number of situations in which his framework does not apply. I left this comment saying, please show me where in Haldane's paper he says that. I can't see this in his work, nor in Komoto Komura's paper. Perhaps you're referring to page 523, where he referred to one exception for rapid evolution for the first land vertebrates. But Haldane admits that this is very exceptional and dismisses it. He then continues to describe his framework. Neither Haldane nor Komura made an effort to resolve this exception. Is there another exception I'm not aware of? What other exception are you referring to? Still no response. I mean, again, it feels like just words being said. Do you get that sometimes, Eric, where evolutionists just speak, and they think they said something?
Yep. That is all the time, actually. I mean, regularly. I need to write an article about that, and that way, Rachel, when we're doing social media, you can just send people that article. It's like, you said a bunch and said nothing. Here's how you said something. Here's how you used words and didn't say anything. That's a great response on a regular basis, because it's literally saying nothing, but they put words there and make you think, oh, it's an argument.
And I think we should get used to catching people or picking on it with people, saying, look, you just said something. What exactly are you saying? Rather than assume what they're saying, clarify yourself. Let's find out exactly what you said. When you say evolution, what do you mean? What do you mean by evolution?
There's a meme or a video clip from a movie or something, maybe I don't know if it's from a good one or a bad one, but it's like, loud words. Like that's kind of what they're doing sometimes.
It is so true. And of course, it's that mob mentality. The louder I shout, the more insulting I am, the more correct I must be. And rational thinking, they pride themselves in thinking rationally, right? I'm a rational, logical thinker. Yeah, but you should behave like that too. You should try to apply that logic and rationality to your comments and to your words.
That's okay, Rachel. Those were words, not an argument. Do you have an argument for me? I like that. Those were words, not an argument.
Oh, that is good. That is good. Hey, I'm going to have to write those things down. Lots of good words good phrases are coming out here. So he then said, in subsequent developments in evolutionary theory, like neutral theory, have further limited the degree to which his work is generally applicable. And I said, what exactly are you referring to? Is this with reference to Moto Komura's neutral theory of evolution? But according to the paper I have, Komura proposed a neutral theory / genetic drift as an alternative solution to natural selection in order to resolve Haldane's dilemma, not to limit it. In what way do you mean that the neutral theory limited the degree to which Haldane's work is generally applicable? According to Komura, Haldane's work no longer causes a problem for him rather than limiting it. I'm interested to know, how did the neutral theory further limit the degree of Haldane's work? Just tell me, just clarify. These are just words. They told nobody anything. All these evolutionists who are hearing this speech, they're putting rude comments because they're saying how dumb creationists are. And there's no clarity as what are you quoting? Where is it coming from? And what exactly do you mean? Yeah?
Yep. Frustrating.
And finally, which is probably my favorite, and this is 35 seconds long to hear the argument. So here it is, or their rebuttal, if you like.
Second problem is that once all of these different mutations appear in different individuals, they can become linked via recombination. You may remember crossing over from high school biology. That's what we're talking about here. Every generation, you pass on a mix of your mom's alleles and your dad's alleles to your kids. If one mutation occurred in mom and a different mutation occurred in dad, those two separate changes may be found together in your kids due to recombination. So it's the parallel nature of evolutionary change and the process of recombination bringing separate mutations together that invalidate this argument.
All right. So he's talking about recombination, which is when a child picks up some traits from both parents. That's it. First of all, it doesn't matter how many mutations or where they come from. If it's beneficial, then the offspring must still outlive everyone else. That's still a fact we cannot change. But I'm going to be kind and ignore that, because that's what I am, Eric. If nothing else, I am a kind, loving soul. Because what's really funny about this is that this guy is not aware that Chase Nelson wrote a review or an essay on Haldane's dilemma and spoke specifically about, guess what? Recombination. Right? So if anybody has anything to say, this is the guy. Chase Nelson is a research fellow at the National Cancer Institute, National Institutes of Health in Maryland, and visiting scientist at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. And he specifically studies the mechanism to do with evolution. So if anybody knows this stuff, it's him. So we're going to let this expert explain to this YouTube friend what is the answer. So this is what Chase Nelson said. Mutations might arise in separate individuals. Their descendants might then mate, affording an opportunity for genetic recombination to place the two mutations in the same genome. So far, so good. Chase Nelson agrees that mutations could happen in different people in the population and agrees that they can get married and have both mutations in the same genome. So congratulations to our YouTube friends. They got this one right. So what could possibly go wrong, Eric? What could possibly go wrong? Well, you see, what they don't tell you is what Chase Nelson says afterwards. There are several obstacles to this scenario. Well, that's not a good way to start a sentence, is it? First, recombination is random and has no tendency to link beneficial alleles more often than to separate them, unless the two mutations interact to boost their collective S. S is the number of the number of offsprings you can have by several orders of magnitude. Random extinction would remain their most likely fate. I'm sorry, what did you just say? Let me see if I can translate it. Recombining two mutations in random is random at best, not to mention the mutation itself is already random. It's not likely to link beneficial mutations together. It's more likely to do what? To separate them. And unless something very special happens, it will most likely cause their extinction. Not exactly the best solution to this dilemma in any way whatsoever.
So I'm imagining like the chart or the pictures they show, and you can work this out in imagery to show it. You know, married couple A and married couple B both have an offspring. This one has a genetic mutation that happens to be beneficial. This one has a genetic mutation that happens to be beneficial. Their kids have to get married, and the recombination of that, the new couple C, has to have both of those beneficial mutations plus potentially another one, and that has to keep going. So if you start with the population, how long would it take to actually get this new population? So yeah, you're talking about I'd love to work out the numbers on that. That's more than lucky. We're way beyond luck at that point.
Well, he's saying that action of recombination like that is more likely to separate those beneficial mutations than recombining them.
Right. He is, yes. The guy on YouTube with Apologia is saying that's how this happens. That solves the dilemma. This guy's saying that's worse of a problem. Yeah.
That is how you separate them. You know, they've been trying to breed animals like that to produce multiple beneficial mutations at the same time. It doesn't work. And Haldane addresses this. Right?
Mark Mundy says that's getting a royal flush with every hand over time. That's exactly right. Get a royal flush every time.
That is so true. I can't explain to you how true that is. And then Chase Nelson points this out in his paper, saying nature also has trouble selecting several traits simultaneously. In 1957, J.B.S. Haldane recognizes the difficulty encountered by breeders selecting for multiple characteristics at once. So it doesn't work the way our evolutionist friends are saying.
Yes. I mean, even when we try to do it on purpose, it's not working.
No. And it's just like, but this is an evolutionary biologist. I mean, he should know this stuff, right? Haldane has already thought about it, and Chase Nelson, who's written his essay on the topic, discusses it. So there are no surprises here. Now, I don't know how to break this bad news for this YouTuber who says he's an evolutionary biologist, but recombination ain't going to solve the problem. If it could, you would have heard about it from whom? Well, Haldane himself or Kimura or any of the other scientists that got involved in the study, whether friends or foe, it doesn't matter, right? So this YouTuber must have a real low opinion of John Haldane, and Mota Kimura, and real low opinion of every other scientist who's ever spoken on this subject. In fact, what's more interesting is that I, John Harris, seem to have more respect for John Haldane and Mota Kimura than all these guys put together. Wow. What is going on? So I believe if John Haldane were alive today, this YouTuber will get this look from him. I found this photo. I wasn't going to be very impressed. I don't think Haldane is going to be very impressed because I think everything this YouTuber said was actually an insult to John Haldane. I really do. I think they did not show enough respect for John Haldane. All these guys should say is that John Haldane was right. There is a problem. Kimura came along and gave us a different solution. And that solution, hey, we believe in that solution. We are committed to that solution. And then we tear it apart and show you that that solution doesn't work, that everybody goes home happy. We don't try to diss John Haldane and say, hey, John Haldane, he didn't mean this. He meant something else. And by the way, look at me. I can solve the problem for you. That is not how science works. It really isn't. So to this comment about recombination, this is what I wrote, and I was as nice as I possibly could. Can you please clarify this statement in view of what Haldane and Chase Nelson say about the problem of selecting several traits simultaneously? It seems you are not aware that generally the number of individuals combining several characteristics decrease exponentially with each additional requirements. So I kind of gave him the reference and hoping that that's going to help him out. He needs help. He really does. So I'm going to finish, but I'm going to take some more questions in a minute with this. I think we can safely say evolution is dead. I really do. I think that is an appropriate slide. It's over. Anyone who says that evolution is possible through gradual beneficial mutations should take that claim to a natural history museum because that's where archaic things belong. It should be buried along with all the other dead fossils. You know what I'm saying? Because evolution is dead. It's dead, and it's dead.
Yes, it is. Wow.
Hopefully, you know why. Hopefully, you know why I call this theory fantasy theory of evolution, because it's just a fantasy. And a fantasy is something that's based on your imagination, which means it's not true. And to be honest with you, with your permission, Eric, I'm not closing this meeting, by the way, but I just want to finish off with I'm going to give the last word to our associate professor from UCLA. She explains to us exactly why some people don't accept the theory of evolution, like you and me, Eric. Yeah. I think she's right. And she makes it. And I'm going to summarize. She summarizes it perfectly. Everything that I said within 15 seconds. So are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, Eric, are you ready to accept the reason why you don't believe in evolution? Are you ready to do it?
Let's hear what she says.
All right, here it comes.
With those who are unable to see evolution, I think is they don't have imaginations.
That is so true.
I think she nailed it.
True. Of imaginations. That is good. Wow. And that's not only imaginations, like, because I've got imagination, but that is beyond imagination. That they don't have enough faith to believe the impossible despite all odds. That really is what it is.
Hey, you know what, Eric? I had students come and they wanted to debate me. They said they're going to bring their friends and they have the hardest core from university. They want to bring their hardest core debaters who prove to me that evolution and my faith and my belief is all false. And when they tried to, I said to them, where did the universe come from? And believe it or not, they started talking about multi-universes. And I said, wait, before you continue, are we just going to make up stories or are we going to stick to facts?
Yeah. Exactly.
Is the winner in this discussion the guy who brings the most imaginative story or answer, or is that the one who brings the most factual answers? And they looked at me and that destroyed every argument they had because it was just made up. It's the guy who thinks more imaginatively than the other guy. The one who's got the greatest imagination, apparently, is the guy who claims to be more scientific. It's not true, is it?
Not true at all. My goodness. Guys, if you have any questions, please put those in the chat right now. This is the big chart. If you can see, this is human chromosome 1, human chromosome 2, human chromosome 3, all the way down to 26 or to 22, and then the X and the Y. And oh my goodness, So I'm going to go through and show individually, but each one of these things next to it here, all of these are diseases, different diseases based on a mutation on the chromosome. So I then lay it out. Here's chromosome number 1. It's got 246 million base pairs. On that one chromosome, these are diseases that are a result of that. And I know I'm not zooming in. I couldn't find that presentation where I have each one zoomed in on. But these are each individual PDFs that you can get, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And all these are doing is showing these are all diseases based on known mutations on these chromosomes, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. All of those are diseases, and then the X and the Y chromosome. By the way, this is the man's chromosome. This is the woman's. And we wonder why we can't understand their brains. I mean, wow. So anyway, maybe I was too far with that one, but it doesn't work.
Oh, that was good. Now, Eric, do any of these slides have actual beneficial mutations? Actual benefit? No. Well, look, if you want to promote this theory and you have some beneficial mutations, they would be the ones to bring out somewhere, wouldn't it? You want to look at all these beneficial mutations. I mean, the beneficial mutations they have are the ones that are from bacteria. And even they are not beneficial mutations, I mean, they
should have the list of all these chromosomes with all the list of all the beneficial mutations. And let's see that one.
And, when they bring up a beneficial mutation, watch out for them not telling you the consequence of that beneficial mutation. So in other words, they ignore the fitness cost. They don't tell you now that it's got this beneficial mutation, it's less fit to survive in a normal environment. They don't tell you any of that. They make it sound like, hey, check it out. We've got a beneficial mutation. They did it with something called an nailonase bacteria. I don't know if you've heard about it, nailonase bacteria, where it mutated that it can now eat nylon.
Yes, I have it. Yeah, mutated, it can eat nylon. Yes.
And then suddenly that sounds fantastic. Hey, check it out. We got this mutation that can do this, and therefore it's a new species. But what they don't tell you is that this mutation actually makes the organism less fit. Because, for example, it can now digest food, but it cannot digest normal food anymore, and it grows more slowly, and therefore it's less fit in its normal environment. So they never point out the consequence. It's not mutation without fitness cost. It comes at a cost, and you're generally better not to have the mutation than to have one. We have no example of where the mutation actually improves the organism in such a way that actually becomes better without any consequence.
Yeah.
And that's what they want to keep telling you.
Tony says, I've heard people say sickle cell anemia is a beneficial mutation. People with sickle cell anemia are more resistant to malaria. Very true. That's true. Sickle cell is where the red blood cells, you don't get the whole thing developed. You only get a part of it. It looks like a sickle. So it's a sickle cell. So now it can't carry oxygen to the body as fast. My dad used to say, saying that sickle cell anemia is a beneficial mutation is kind of like saying, because you can't get malaria, is kind of like saying, did you know if you cut off your feet, you can't get athlete's feet? It's like, that doesn't make it a beneficial mutation. It's not overall helpful.
That is exactly my point, Eric. You're absolutely right with that. I mean, in my talk, if I did the full version, I was going to show you the actual mutation that produces a sickle cell disease. But of course, I wasn't able to bring it out, which makes it difficult. And point out several other mutations that we say they're good, but actually, what are they? They're of no good whatsoever, because it actually makes the organism even and healthier or even worse. But I was hoping your slide would have some of those, so I can say, look, see all these mutations? That's supposedly good. Look how bad they really are. This is what it produces.
Yeah. Exactly. So that
would really help.
I put the link in there to everybody. It's a public.ornl.gov site gallery, topic 47 anyway. So it's there. But when you send me your PowerPoint, I'll add these PowerPoint slides that I did for each one of these, and we'll send that out to everybody.
What a good idea. I just went on there and I cannot see, well, I have to download something somewhere, do I? But you're sending it to me anyway.
I'm sending it. Yep. Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
What
John,
a ride.
This is so good. This is so good. I mean, this is a home run, and we have gone 2 hours and 19 minutes, and we still have a whole bunch of people hanging out with us. You guys deserve an award for listening to John that long. Okay.
Do this everywhere I go.
Just so good. So good.
That is so fantastic. We have those apologetic sessions we do, and it's supposed to be done in like 45 minutes, 1 hour. And sometimes it goes to midnight. But of course, not it hangs around. And then even I get tired at the end. But apparently, we have real good patient people on your webinar. So well done.
Well, man, partners, thank you guys for hanging on so long. I know several of us had to go, but thank you guys for really getting these details. This is so important. They don't have an answer. You do. Now, go share this answer with the world. There are people that are waiting on you to come share this truth. God wants to use you to share this truth with somebody. Let's do that this week. I was in Idaho this last weekend, preached 9 times in a couple days. Had a great time. Met a family who had just lost their mom recently, got to minister to them. And the daughter and the son, 16 and 20 or 21, I challenged them. They're just feeling convicted about sharing their faith. I said, I tell you what, I'll make you a deal. By next Sunday, because I was meeting with them on Sunday night, by next Sunday, you have to have shared the gospel with at least one person. Got a text yesterday. I already shared the gospel with 3 people. And sometimes it's just, you need that challenge. I gave them some gospel tracts and I'm like, praise God. So Creation Today partners, thank you for partnering with us. Here's the challenge. Share the gospel with somebody this week. Let's do what God has called us to do. Enough learn. Let's do the share. Let's share the gospel with somebody that needs to hear it. John, thank you for taking so much time to learn this, to buy all those resources, to get those books, to understand the arguments, and then present them so effectively here to us. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It's been an honor, Eric. Love to see you again one day.
Awesome. What are we doing the next show on?
Let's talk about how to destroy atheism in 5 minutes.
I like it. All right, we got our next talk for you. I love it. Awesome. Wow. Well, thanks for hanging out, guys. John and I are going to hang out just for a minute. I'm going to let the girls come in and say hey to him. You're welcome to leave or hang out with us as we go to more green room style. Love you guys. See you next week.
Genetics don't lie, let me break it down for you. Holding's dilemma, evolution is through. Mathematical impossibilities, crystal clear. Darwin's theory, it's time to make it disappear. Genetic variation, it's just not enough to create the complexity we see. It's tough, random mutations and natural selection. Nah, it's just a flawed conjecture, no correction. Evolution's dead on arrival, can't you see? The evidence speaks, it's not just me. Irreducible complexity, a puzzle